Good morning. Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, November 6, 2023. This is a workshop meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. We are live at City Hall Commissioners Room, second floor of City Hall. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:01 a.m. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll start off up here with roll call. Commissioner Don Preston.
Here.
Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Stranowski.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Bunky Markert.
Here.
And Mayor Stan Mills. We have a full complement of the mayor and commissioners and are able to formally conduct business today. With that, I would also like to identify staff it takes to run these meetings. We've got City Secretary on my left over here, Ann Womack. Assistant City Manager Al acting as interim City Manager, Evan Miller. City Solicitor Glenn Mandalis. And Communications Specialist Lynn Cohen back here, and hiding behind Susan is Margaret Carson, Executive Secretary. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to thank everybody for being here in person. As you know, as we get to certain topics, we'll ask for feedback, and if so, then you would identify yourself, come up front, identify yourself and what your relationship is to the city, and then give us some input. We appreciate that. I'd also like to thank those that are watching virtually that couldn't be here in person. And I'd like to remind everybody that documents that support our agenda items are embedded in the agenda. If you go to www.rehoboth.com, on the center of the homepage, right side, you'll find a lime green box that takes you to the portal, and you'll be able to seek out our meeting information and documents. And during this meeting today, in fact, one of the agenda items is a presentation by City Secretary Ann Womack showing us how to use the website and access the portal and certain documents. So we're looking forward to that. With that, I would like to go to the first item of business, which is a presentation of proclamation recognizing November 11, 2023 as Veterans Day. We have two gentlemen representing the VFW and the American Legion that are going to join us, as well as Vice President of the Board, Patrick Gossett. Gentlemen, come right back here. We've got two representatives from the local groups here. One is Dave Diefendorfer with the VFW. We've got Tom Dahl, commander of the VFW on King Charles, and VFW's on State and American Legion on State Road. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to read a proclamation about Veterans Day, November 11th, 2023. Whereas the contributions and sacrifices of the people who served in the armed forces have been vital in maintaining our freedoms and way of life, and whereas millions of Americans have served in the armed forces of the United States during the past century, and whereas hundreds of thousands of Americans have given their lives while serving in the armed forces in the past century, and whereas our state is home to more than 525,000 veterans, 63,000 active duty military, 17,000 National Guard and Reserve and their families, and whereas our veterans are brave and selfless individuals who, when duty called, willingly put themselves in harm's way to defend the lives and liberty of others, and whereas their abiding patriotism and enduring devotion to the ideals on which the United States is founded can never fail to inspire us. And whereas their abiding patriotism and enduring devotion to the ideals on which the United States is founded can never fail to inspire us. And whereas our veterans understand the important task before those American service members now keeping watch, and now therefore we, Mayor Stan Mills and Board Vice President Patrick Gossett, do hereby proclaim November 11th, 2023 as Veterans Day in the city of Rehoboth Beach, proclaim this 6th day of November 2023, and signed by the Mayor and Vice President. I'm going to give you one. I'm going to give you one, and we're going to do handshakes here so we can get a photo op. You know. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Tom. Next item of business is correspondence, and Ann haven't identified any correspondence from constituents. With that, we'll go right on to the city manager's report. Evan Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, and members of the public. First, I'd like to start off by introducing Mary Ellen Gray. For those of you who have not had the opportunity to meet Mary Ellen, Mary Ellen Gray is the city's new Planning and Community Development Director. She comes to us from Dover, Delaware, where she held a similar position as the Director of the Development of Planning, Inspections, and Community Development. Mary Ellen has experience supervising programs in land use planning, community development, and housing programs, permitting, inspections, licensing, code enforcement, and life safety. So Mary Ellen will be taking over as the new supervisor of the Building and Licensing Department. I know she's already started attending several meetings, the 2 Planning Commission meetings last week, and then we've certainly been bringing her up to speed with a lot of the projects and initiatives going on in the city. So we're happy to have Mary Ellen on board, and again, just wanted to introduce the mayor and commissioners, and then certainly members of the public to Mary Ellen. So,
Mary Ellen, welcome aboard. Yeah. Thank you.
A few additional updates for the city manager's report this morning. The city will host a BB Healthcare Flu Clinic from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Tuesday, November 14th in the Convention Center. Flu vaccines will be available for those 18 and older, and BB will provide both the regular dose and the high dose vaccine for individuals 65 and older. The shower poles, foot showers, and water fountains are being winterized and covered. The Delaware Avenue and Baltimore Avenue restrooms will be winterized the first week of December, weather dependent. Just a brief update on several ongoing projects in the Public Works Department. The water main replacement on Laurel Street is now complete. The water meter replacement on the south side of town may be completed as early as the end of this week. About 500 meters are currently being replaced. One of the city's 2 street sweepers is currently out of service. It is a top priority now to get that back into operation. So until then, we will just have 1 street sweeper running. Also, the work on the stormwater outfall on Scarborough Avenue Extended is underway as well. And finally, this year's community holiday tree is scheduled to be installed at the bandstand on November 15th, again, weather permitting. The donors' names this year may sound familiar as they also donated last year's tree. We're grateful to Dean and Debbie Smith of the Greater Rehoboth area for their donation, as well as to Harry Caswell, Inc., George W. Plummer and Son, and Del Marva Power for their assistance in cutting, transporting, and installing the tree for us. The tree lighting and holiday sing-along will be Friday, November 24th, beginning at 6:30 p.m. And that's all I have to report this morning.
Thank you. Any questions of the city manager? No, thank you, Evan. We appreciate it. With that, we'll go to the city solicitor's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on a letter that I sent you all this past Thursday. Last June, I sent you an initial letter letting you know that I had become managing partner of our law firm and that was going to add some increased responsibilities to my workload. And I followed up last Thursday. I wanted to read this into the record so it's on the public record. So this is a letter to the mayor and commissioners dated November 2nd, 2023. Dear Mayor and Commissioners, In June of this year, I informed you of some recent changes in my professional responsibilities. I noted that my law partners and I expanded our business into Maryland and that I had been elevated to managing partner. When I became managing partner, I created a series of management committees within the firm with the goal of ensuring that the city of Rehoboth Beach and other clients I represent would continue to receive quality legal services. I also noted that I intended to continue serving as the city's solicitor. As I've settled into the new role of managing partner, it has become apparent that the role is more time-consuming than I had anticipated. Even with the management support that has been created, my responsibilities within the firm have increased quite significantly. While I do not believe it to be proper for me to continue as city solicitor, I do believe that my nearly 2 decades of service to the city have equipped me with the historical knowledge base that can continue to be of value to the city. Moreover, several of the firm's 27 lawyers that have worked on the city's legal work for many years, and they too continue to be useful resources for the city. With all those factors in mind, I strongly recommend that the city consider transitioning Alex Burns, Esquire, with my firm to the role of city solicitor. Many of you have interacted with Alex over the past several months and have witnessed his legal acumen and attention to detail firsthand. Alex joined the firm after a year-long judicial clerkship with the Honorable Mark H. Connor of the Delaware Superior Court. Alex holds a degree in political science from the University of Pennsylvania, a Master of Public Administration from the University of Delaware, and a law degree from Temple University Beasley School of Law. Alex's interests are in legal services in the public administration sector, making him a perfect candidate to be the next city solicitor. City wishes to move forward. The firm will prepare an engagement letter for your consideration, and I do thank the commissioners for this opportunity and happy to answer any questions. Maybe not, this may not be the appropriate time for those questions, but to the extent you have them, I'm available.
No, we'll defer any questions to a later time.
Thank you, Mayor.
I assume that until we make a decision on the replacement, we're not going to be held high and dry.
No, we will obviously continue to service the city.
All righty, very
for whatever
good.
period of time you need, Mayor.
Thank you. You've been here, what, 17 years?
I think it's been about 17 since 2006, that's right.
Very good. Thank you very much. With that, we're going to move to the next item, which old business. There's no old business identified, so we'll move right on to new business. Item A, discuss request by the Rehoboth Beach Public Library Board to modify deed restrictions relating to the land commonly known as the location of the Rehoboth Beach Public Library, and more specifically described as Sussex tax map parcel numbers as noted in the agenda, in order to reconfigure the interior space. We have Public Library President Kay Wheatley here. She's going to start off, and then I'm going to make a little presentation, try to illustrate some of what she is saying orally.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Kay Wheatley, President of the Rehoboth Library Board. I want to also introduce Liaison Sorson and Tucker Kochjon, members of the board. Just to bring you up to date, and then to get to the request, we asked Craig Williams from Becker Morgan Group to design different options based on feedback from the task force and by limiting the space based on DDL, Delaware Division of Libraries, and the American Library Association recommendation for the size of a library, which is 1 square foot per capita. The population based on the 2020 census for Rehoboth, and we went approximately 1.5 miles or so out of the town limits, is between 5,000 and 7,000 square feet. We serve approximately 800 to 850 people in the, I don't know, off-season, shoulder season, whatever you want to call it, October to May. And then 1,400 to 1,450 people, and these are per week in the summertime. Craig then, from Becker Morgan, developed 3 options, which we developed a design and construction committee that has 3 members from the board and 4 members from the task force on it. We had them look at it first so that if they had any questions or concerns or feedback, they could give it to him, and then that committee took it forward to the task force. Craig and that committee presented to the task force, I think it was October 11th, and then they made a recommendation to the board to accept option C. The board then reviewed all the options that had been presented, and they agreed with the task force and approved the recommendation. which is what brings me here today, because it has us keeping the end of the building where the current entrance is. And we'll go into more detail on that in a minute. But as a result, the agreement between the town and the library is for the opposite end of the building. So we're here today to ask for you guys to consider switching the agreement from one end of the building to the other end of the building, from lot 76 to lot 72. Just so you know, if you agree, once that's done and all in place, we will move forward with telling Craig Williams from Becker Morgan to develop conceptual drawings, which then will go back to the task force, to the board, and we'll have a public meeting. And we will also be able at that point to develop a better guess on the cost. Right now, from the information we have, we are anticipating an investment of between $4 to $5 million, or $5 to $6 million for the project. We have $4 to $5 million right now, which would mean we would need to also do some additional fundraising. So while the conceptual drawings are being done, we would also be starting to develop a fundraising campaign. When I spoke with the mayor about speaking today, he came up with the suggestion, and I think it's an excellent one, about presenting what we're talking about visually. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the mayor because he is the main one that put it together. I worked with him a little bit, but he's much more technical savvy than I am. So he put together the presentation, and then after that, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer.
Thank you, Kay. Again, this is a collaboration between Kay and myself to try to illustrate what the concepts are, so that everybody, including us and the public, would better understand everything. So obviously, on the first slide is a frontal view, the north face of the library building. And just to orient ourselves, on the right side here is a summer house restaurant. On the left, you can't see it, but to the left of the building is Bloody Mary's shop and Playa Bowls. But if we look at the next slide, the aerial view, it'll reiterate that on the right side or west side is the summer house restaurant. On the left or east side is the Bloody Mary shop and Playa Bowls. The front entrance to the library, if you crawl, is right in you go inside here and then into the building. Then there's this little recess here, and then here's the right side of the building. Behind the building is the Cape and Lopin Senior Center, and of course, Christian Street and Rehoboth Avenue to orient ourselves there. The compass rose you can see. What I did is I put red lines through what I approximated as the building divisions for an east side of the building, a center of the building, and a west side of the building. Now, these lines are not meant to be an accurate representation of the lot lines. They may approximate it, because I think there are just 3 lots at this time. Correct. Glenn. And so, again, those are just building divisions. So the right side, I think it's important to know that there was an agreement between the city and the library, where the library was given, actually it was cost you $1, I believe, to acquire the lot from the city. This is a lot that was owned by the city. At the time, there was a building on it, I think formerly used by a telephone or something. And then it was
Diamond State.
and then it was also a library at that point. So at this point, I'd like to pause and have Glenn explain, if you would, Glenn, how the city came to give them this property. And more important, where we are today is the conditions for giving them that involve if this property, for instance, ceased to be used as a library, then what happens? If you would give us a little history, please.
Thanks, Mayor. So the lot that, the most westerly lot, where your cursor was just a moment ago, that's lot 76, and it goes 74, 72, going east toward the ocean. So the lot beside Summer House was a lot that the city owned years ago, And originally, the city leased that lot to the library for the library to construct the original library portion. The library then had an opportunity in the 90s to expand into lots 74 and 72. And at that time, the library approached the city and asked if it could actually acquire the land itself rather than just leasing the land on lot 76. The city agreed to do that under an agreement in 1992, and there was a new deed created. The interesting thing about that deed, kind of having, looking forward, there were some provisions in it that apply if the library property, that being the lot that the city owns, lot 76, if the library ceased, if it ceased to be used as a library and ceased to be operated by a local library board, not a state library board, then certain things could happen. There's three things under the deed that could happen. One is that the lot would just revert back to the city. So if the library decided not to use that lot 76 as for a library purpose and not be operated by a local library board, one option for the city is the city could elect to just have the property revert. It'd come back into the city's inventory of properties, and you could do with it as you saw appropriate. A second option is the library might decide to, they anticipated that the library might decide to sell the library property, being perhaps all three lots. If that were to happen, the city could exercise a right of first refusal. So the library gets a purchaser, and the purchase price is some amount of money. If the city wanted to purchase those three lots for that amount of money, you could, in effect, step in front of the potential purchaser, and the library and the city would then be able to purchase all three of those lots. And if you were to purchase back those three lots, it would be discounted by the fair market value of lot 76. The third option is the payback option, which basically the city could say, we will allow the library to go ahead and sell off all of those lots, and then the library would pay back to the city whatever the fair market value of lot 76 is. So those are the three options that are available under the current deed. Did you want me to talk at all about the question about whether you can convert from lot 76 to lot?
Let me go through the options here, if you don't mind. And I had a note, and I just forgot it. It'll come to me. Let me go through the options, if you don't mind, real quick. My one question, I just remember, my one question is, if it ceases to be used as a library, that would refer to just the lot that we gave them, correct? That if these two areas, the two lots that we did not give them, cease to become a library, how does that impact this?
The agreement really only pertains to lot 76, the city's lot. So so long as the city's lot continues to be used as a library and operated by the local library board, then everything stays status quo, regardless of what happens with lots 74 and 72. But if 74 and 72, not what was the city's lot, continues to be used as a library, even operated by a local library board, and lot 76 is not used as a library, then all those three options kick in: the reversionary option, the buyback option, and the right of first refusal option.
Okay, so again, the east lot is lot 72, the center one is 74, the west is 76, and again, 76 is the lot acquired from the city. So let's look at the options that Kay talked about, and of which are also articulated in her letter of October 31st. These are the options for use of portions of the existing library spaces for future library services. Option A is use of the west portion only, and which if changed, that would not violate the conditions because it would be retained as a library. But the library board, these are quotes taken from their letter of October 31st. The board deemed that just using the west one was deemed too small to offer all the library services that they wanted to think. And feel free to chime in if I mischaracterize anything. So that's option A that was disfavored. Option B was the use of the west and center portions only, deemed possible but not best. And this would also, if they did this, would not violate the conditions because, again, the western lot 76 would be utilized continually as a library, right? So we're good there. But again, they said this is possible but not best. And then in their letter, they said option C was the use of this east and center portions only. The board deemed this in their letter to be the best option because this option gives ample space and access to the upstairs. So you recall this east portion has a second floor to it, one big room, essentially, plus a kitchenette. So the library board preferred option for reconfiguring the interior space for library services was this one, option C. Now, of course, just like I referenced before, or unlike I referenced before, the west lot would be abandoned, so to speak, and used for whatever other purposes.
address that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, our intent has never been or is not to sell any of the three pieces of property. It is to use the east section and the center section and to rent the west section to a complementary user, like maybe an educational institution or something like that, that we could partner with, but it would also provide some operating income for the library.
Thank you. So the westernmost lot, the lot that they acquired from the city, in option C, which is their preferred option, would be utilized by leasing it out to another entity or whatever. But the point is, doing option C violates the conditions. Right. Okay, so the conditions, if they did option C, they would have to revert this property back to the city or pay us, right? So why you all are here today is to present this, and again, as you introduced your ask at the last meeting and through your letter, is to get the commissioners' opinions on this arrangement, and rather than violating the agreement, would the commissioners consider amending the agreement to allow this kind of configuration? Am I stating it approximately correctly? So do you want to, let's see, no, that's it. So I'd like to open it up to the commissioners, and the intent would be that if the commissioners are amenable to this, then we would direct the solicitor to work with their solicitor to modify the agreement and bring that back to us. Most likely bring it back to us at the December workshop so that we can talk about it, so you know what the time frame would be. And if the commissioners are not amenable to this, then perhaps it stops here, or we could carry it to a vote at a future meeting. So let's go to the commissioners up here first before we go to the members of the public. Does anybody like to comment?
I just had a question, if I may. I know you haven't got the proposed schematic design yet, but I was just wondering, any thoughts about the usage of the lot 76, the western portion, to some amenable organization? Would that be something that could conceivably have maybe more than one use in that? The rear, I'm just saying in terms like the rear portion of the building, assuming you're not going to be making major alterations to that lot. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But I was just wondering if there would be storage space or some utility space or something that would remain on that lot that would serve the new library,
That-
where the entire use of the building would not necessarily be for someone else.
That very well could be.
Okay.
What we would, once we would know whether or not we could do it, what we would direct, and I've already spoken with the architect, I have not released his work, but is to, right now, what we're talking, option C represents about 7,500 square feet. And we want to make sure that we're able to serve to the degree that we're trying to. So we've asked him if additional space is needed, he could look at the back part of the west part.
Okay.
He could look at enclosing something on the balcony, and he could look at enclosing the breezeway. And just so you know, one of the reasons we're retaining this, we want to retain the whole property is because we don't want things to change from the facade standpoint. And if you sell a portion of the building,
Right.
you lose control over that, okay? However, there would probably need to be an entrance added, and what we've talked about, we have not talked to anybody other than among ourselves at the table, is kind of where that red line is on the right-hand side of the center property, where those trees are in the front there.
Right, right.
Is to put an entrance there into the west part of the building.
Okay.
And then we've asked the architect to look at access at the back part of the building between the center section and the west section. Until he can get into it, which we haven't released him to do, that's all, we've told him to look at whatever options work.
Sure. I just wanted to see if there
Yeah.
was some flexibility.
No, that's a
with
great
regards to
question.
that. Okay.
So if I can follow up on that, Glenn, if they use any portion of the west, just as mentioned, for library, does that fulfill the condition? Or do they have to, the entirety of that west lot needs to be used for a library? Or else the conditions kick in?
That's a good question that I had not looked at. My presumption is that the spirit of the agreement is that the entire lot be used as a library, and I don't think just a small portion of it would actually, accomplish the goals and objectives of the agreement. So my expectation is that probably a fair reading of the documents is that the entire lot needs to be used for library purposes, but I can look at that more closely if that develops into something you need to answer on.
Oh, okay, not right now, but is there anybody else before we go to the public? I'm amenable, but we'll come back to that. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak out on this proposal by the library to for me, it keeps the library in town. It is a bigger footprint certainly than only maintaining the western lot and renting out or leasing out the east and center lot. Looks to me like to be a good proposal. Anything else? Andrea, if you come up, just state your name and relationship to the city, then we'll have Susan come up.
Hi, my name is Andrea Hoffman.
Oh, let's turn, we're gonna turn you on there. There you go.
Hi, I'm Andrea Hoffman. I live at 137 Henlopen Avenue. I'm actually on the task force, the library task force, and it's been a good process. I think that we really needed that east portion because of the large space upstairs. And I think this is a really good start. We have asked whether we could look at adding the section, the open section around to enclose that and include it as part of the library. I think that space would be very useful for us. So I'm very hopeful about this, and I'm very happy that the facade is being saved. So, thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Susan?
Maybe just quickly following up on your
yes.
question while she's coming up. The agreement does say it must be used exclusively as a public library.
Okay, thank you for research.
Thank you. My name's Susan Stewart. I'm a homeowner in Rehoboth. And I guess I have a couple questions. One has, what is the square footage of the two easterly lot, of the structures on the two easterly lot? And has any consideration been given to renovating the westerly structure that's the one that's subject to restriction, because if that could be done, it seems like a big structure there. Could a second floor be added? Has that been considered? Because the project is a pretty big budget, and that would allow integrity to the initial intent of the initial deed restriction, and also probably free up lots for some other purpose, rental or sale by the library.
Okay, would you mind,
Just so you know, the total square footage on the building right now is about, it's just over 11,000 square feet, and that includes the upstairs, and that's usable space. That doesn't count like the storage room or the room where the heating is and stuff like that. What we're looking at for the lots, the most easterly lot and the middle lot encompasses about 7,500 square feet. Okay, what's left is about 3,000, I'm rounding. We have talked about looking at adding a second floor or closing off, like the single, like if you're upstairs and you can look down into the bottom, okay? We talked about adding that. The cost becomes very prohibitive on doing that. I think the one thing we're all trying to do is keep a library downtown. So to me, and I'm not speaking necessarily for the board, but to me, as long as there's a library downtown and it's meeting the needs of the patrons and the community, does it matter which lot the agreement's on?
thank you, Kay. Anybody,
And just to follow up for a moment, the lots are all plotted as 50 by 100 lots, all three of the lots.
I'm sorry,
Land
what
mass.
was that?
The actual land mass of each of the three lots, they're all plotted as 50 by 100 lots, so they're
Okay.
equal in size.
thank you. Any other members of the public like to speak? If not, I'll bring it back here. You know, again, it's very appetizing to me. I think it's the least disruptive of any potential ideas, especially putting the second floor on the right-hand side. I think it's probably less expensive to do this route than putting a second floor on the right-hand side. The facade basically is retained pretty much from what I understand. And you've got a lot of expansion capability in this option. And that if you remember, here's a second floor open balcony here. Of course, you'll displace those news reporters reporting on POTUS and FLOTUS. And then underneath this area is even a bigger area that's an open patio or something downstairs. So you've got much greater opportunity to expand. And I personally, I would like to be willing to invest time in having our attorney investigate what kind of amendment would be required to be able to do this swap. Anybody else?
I'm amenable to that.
I have a curiosity. On the surface, this looks relatively benign to me, but I'm thinking weeks down the road here as we start our budget discussions. And Kay, I believe you mentioned y'all have around 4 to 5 million either already raised or pledged or whatever.
That's for capital, it's not for operating. Our request here is always for operating. The capital is 3 million of it is ARPA. We have some bond bill. We have not started public fundraising yet until we know better what we're doing. And you can't really go out and ask for money for that until you have drawings that show people, here's what we're going to do with your money.
Right.
So that would probably start sometime in '24, should we move forward.
Okay, so I'm thinking that, or I'm reading into what you just said, that your request to the city for funding will be very similar to as usual.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners?
I just wanted to state that I'm checking my understanding here, but we're talking only about the lots in terms of like the quote value or comparative value of the one versus the other. We're just talking about the lot portion, correct? That if we were to swap them or reassign them or something like that, it's basically that we're just saying that that lot 72 will become basically the same status that the lot 76
That would be
was.
my expectation.
Right.
You-
I mean, that's the
you,
I just want people to
Facilitate
be
the
clear.
swap.
Yeah.
But leave the conditions in there so that if it ceased to be a library, and we'd have to talk about it, is that this east end center, the entirety of that area then becomes the subject to the conditions, or is it just the east portion? And I think we'd have to articulate all that, but yes, that's my expectation.
Mayor, if I can just add a couple things. One, part of the reason that we want to retain ownership of the west portion, if we develop the east and the center, is so that should growth continue or services continue, we can expand into that area in the future and end up having the whole building be a library too. But right now, partly because of operating costs, we are trying to just center on the east section and the center section.
So that confuses me a little bit, and maybe
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Maybe I'm mishearing it. I thought what started all this in the first place was a diminished need
Correct.
here. But didn't I just hear you say if the need then goes in the other direction?
I'm talking 5, I'm planning on not being around when that would happen. I'm talking 10+ years down the road. If the need is there, we would still have ownership of the west part of the building. The need may never be there.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor, also, I support this change in deed restrictions. Again, the city has no ownership of any of those lots, and it was a gift for, a sale of $1 when Diamond State Telephone sold the building to the city, and the city then sold it to the library. So I think it's still in the public interest to maintain that, and it has an opportunity for us to maintain the library in the city downtown. As being part of the task force and attending all those meetings, I think bringing through it gave me a much more in-depth vision of what a new library is. It's not just about books anymore, different uses and what is needed. But one of the concerns that I still share is the operating expenses of the library. And I think that if the west lot is turned into some type of retail or other use that allows hopefully a steady flow of revenue that would, as I understand it, would be strictly used for operating budget within the downtown library.
That's correct.
That is the intent. So again, I am supportive of this, but again, I would like to have a negotiation, if you will, about the transfer of the deed restrictions, not only to the east, but to the center lots, just something to explore while we have that opportunity. Thank you.
I will say, if we expand the agreement, it would also need to go back to our board. I don't know how they would feel. We hadn't really thought about that.
I said negotiate.
Right.
Well, so far I've heard from Ed, Patrick, and myself favoring directing the attorney for the city to look into developing an amendment to reflect this and protect the city's interests. Is there anybody else? Yay or nay?
I think we should take that step forward.
All right.
I agree.
So we've gotten a majority, then we'll do that, and I'll work with the attorney to look into that. I would expect that we could put this on the December workshop meeting.
Jay Becker is who we have used in the past from Hudson Jones and Jay Work. I can reach out to him. Should I just tell him if his workload allows that you'll be calling him, or what should I do?
Tell him that one of our city attorneys will be contacting him.
Okay. And if there's some change in that, I don't expect it, but if there is, I'll let you know.
Yeah, thank you.
Mayor, in doing the draft, would the commissioners expect that it does include the center lot or not? Because that'll require some additional deed work to be done for that center property as well versus just the east and west properties. Or would you rather I put together,
I think I'd prefer that it be the east and the center. It's not an equal trade, if you will, you understand, but
okay,
is there any,
I have one question for the solicitor. If the west lot is continued under the direction or guidance of the library, what we're really triggering is just use and/or selling of the property, right? So would we even need to do anything since we don't own the lot?
well,
In other
yeah,
words, if they're still maintaining control as to who goes in there,
I think it's, if it's not used exclusively as a library purpose, is inconsistent with the agreement. So I think something would need to be done to revise the agreement. And I think you still want to be sure those deed restrictions are on one of the lots. I mean, if they're going to maintain that property, I suppose that is an option, that the deed restrictions could remain on lot 74 and some other, or on lot,
well, that's what I'm thinking, and maybe
76
we
and
just
some other-
update what the restrictions are. In other words,
Another
still a sale would trigger it, but if they're saying they're going to bring in an educational entity or something that's complementary to the library, do we even need to go through a swap?
that's another option, yeah.
Okay.
And what you were just talking about right before the meeting started, Tucker mentioned to me, and we hadn't talked about it or thought about it, but I mean, we're comfortable with you looking at changes to the agreement that are just, we're all accomplishing what we're trying to accomplish.
Right, I mean, you could, rather than revising and doing a series of new deeds, you could simply revise the agreement and probably still have to revise the deed because it refers to the agreement as to the westerly lot, and say so long as it's under control of the library and lots 72 and 74 remain exclusively as a library purpose, then, you know, that would probably be an easier legal exercise, I suppose, than the gymnastics required to actually swap the two. You can accomplish it either way, but it's something worth considering. I'll prepare it as a swap so that that's the most extensive, and then if you want to dial it back, you'll be able to.
all right, thank you. Anybody else? All right, we've got directions. Thank you very much. Walter, come ahead. State your name and relationship to the city, please.
Walter Brittingham, 123 Hennepin Avenue. I've been around a while. The terminology for the right-hand section of the building was a Verizon central office. It's built like a tank. To add anything to it is very, very expensive because of the way it's constructed. I think, without coming in a hearing sense, that the only way to make this work is for the library to continue to own it all, because I don't think anybody up front there is sitting, how is the electric? Are they two or three separate electric meters? How do you separate all that? Very, very expensive. It's basically a partitioning. I'm not throwing something in. This needs to go to the Planning Commission for some deep thought as to what happens to it. And the library would be far better off to own the whole thing and lease it out, whether some of it might be back to the city or whatever. But I've done work in that building in the addition when it was built, and it's very complicated. You have fire alarm systems in it, evacuation systems, and it's you're running too fast. I'm not saying stop, but it needs some guidance. And sorry, but the lifeguard facility is an example. You're running into problems because it wasn't handled maybe as it should have been, but your architect did not lead you that way. And you don't need to be spending a lot of money with the attorney and the architects when the obvious is let the, as a preferred method, let the library continue to own it all, and then if they want to rent some of it out, it would be a lot less expensive because If you had to go to partitioning, then you drag in the planning commission, and you take this out 5 or 6 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Anybody else? If not, we have direction to go forward. Thank you very much,
Thank
Kay
you.
Tucker, for showing up today. We appreciate it. Next item of business, new business B, receive and discuss report of the Planning Commission in response to that certain resolution of the Mayor and Commissioners pursuant to 22 Del.C, Section 708, concerning a potential alteration, vacation of a portion of Baltimore Avenue at its easterly terminus. The final report generated by the Planning Commission is embedded in the agenda. And first, I'd like to turn it over to Assistant City Manager Evan Miller because he's been working on monitoring this and going to respond to it, and he'll articulate what our potential path forward is.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So as you indicated, certainly myself and a number of the city staff have been following the Planning Commission meetings pretty heavily. Just to stay updated in terms of what those recommendations we're ultimately going to include within this report. So I want to first thank the Planning Commission for their efforts in developing this report and just briefly give the Mayor and Commissioner sort of a synopsis of some of the documentation that we are working to prepare in response to that Planning Commission report. I think pretty much the documents that we are working to prepare address the recommendations by the Planning Commission. Certainly, if you hear the summary that I'm about to give and the documents we're preparing and you think that we might be missing anything, please let me know. But the goal is to prepare all of these materials by the end of this week so that they are available in the agenda a week prior to our regular meeting on the 17th. So first and foremost, I want to acknowledge some of the work that DBF, our architect for the Beach Patrol building, is working on. In response to the Planning Commission report, they are working to submit a new visual depiction of the precise boundaries and characteristics of the properties immediately adjacent to the proposed abandonment area. They're also working on a letter which articulates the following. The Fire Marshal's site plan approval for the Beach Patrol and what that means concerning life safety and adherence to state fire protection standards, including the impacts to the surrounding properties. That letter will also address any impacts to the existing utilities and their analysis on the availability and capacity that had to be done as part of their architectural efforts in preparing those construction documents. Additionally, if any of the utilities are being located, they'll identify which utilities those are. We also have received a revised site plan which shows the locations of the new fire lanes and the relocated fire hydrant, and I'll touch on the ordinances that we'll be drafting later on in this update. Finally, the DBF letter will acknowledge why the building was designed to encroach as far west as it does. You'll recall the Streetscape Task Force, as well as some of the presentations that we made before the Mayor and Commissioners. We were very cognizant of the view shed, wanting to preserve the view shed, but also the needs of the Beach Patrol and the restroom facilities. And certainly ADA accessibility provides as a main reason why the building does encroach as far west as it does. Again, an update on that will be provided within their letter. For EDIS is our construction manager on the project. We did meet with the Admiral on Baltimore after their comments at a previous Planning Commission meeting concerning their life safety concerns. Meeting minutes have been prepared from that meeting, and we're working on getting Mr. Moore the information requested by his insurance company. Again, those documents will be available to the Mayor and Commissioners, members of the Planning Commission, and members of the public. We also are working to document comments from the surrounding property owners. We've received a written letter from Vince Robertson, who represents 1 Rehoboth Avenue. We have also reached out again to the Admiral and Atlantic Sands. They have been reluctant to provide a written letter at this time, but we have recently been in touch with them concerning the project and any concerns that they have, and minutes will be provided from those conversations. One of the Planning Commission recommendations was to document any agreements that we have with the surrounding property owners in writing. No such agreements exist. The Building and Licensing Department, they are looking into the consideration as to whether the Beach Patrol building should be designated a specific zoning classification. One consideration was whether it should be O1 open space or simply municipal building. And then secondly, one of the recommendations was to address Chapter 270, Section 22, minimum lot dimensions. There was a question as to whether the proposed abandonment would reduce the frontage of the 1 Rehoboth Avenue property along Baltimore Avenue to less than 50 feet. Again, these two considerations or recommendations are being reviewed by the Building and Licensing Department, and a response will be issued in writing to those two recommendations. I also wanted to mention that we will work to provide a copy of the notice that our code enforcement officers had distributed to the businesses on the 2 blocks of Baltimore Avenue ahead of the Planning Commission meeting. I believe the code enforcement officers also did document the property owners that they made contact with, but I'll have to verify that. Certainly, if that was documented, we'll provide that as well. I did mention earlier the ordinances, so we will work to develop draft ordinances to amend Chapter 92, Section 36, which is the section of the code that establishes fire lanes. So we will have a draft ordinance prepared on the new fire lanes created as a result of the Beach Patrol headquarters. We'll also work on an ordinance to amend 9265 parking areas for accessible parking spaces. So those two ordinances will be prepared and available to the public. Finally, I do want to touch on the rendering efforts that we've entered into with Rossi Group. You'll recall that this was a project that we started probably over a month ago. So we have actually received just this morning renderings of the new Beach Patrol headquarters with the proposed 1 Rehoboth Avenue Hotel, the Atlantic Crown Hotel, and the streetscape concept, not to be confused with the design, but the concept recommendations that were provided by the Streetscape Task Force. Again, those two projects and the streetscape concept have been incorporated into a schematic with the Beach Patrol headquarters and the surrounding properties. So those renderings will also be provided. That is everything that I have to report. And as I mentioned, we are targeting, because offices are closed on Friday, November 10th, we're targeting to have those documents to Ann on Thursday, November 9th. That's this week. Again, when we publish the agenda for the Commissioners' regular meeting on November 17th.
Thank you. So let me articulate a couple paths forward here for discussion. One is Evan just mentioned coming to the November 17th regular meeting and giving a more expansive response to the report and recommendations within the Planning Commission report. If we think that that is going to be sufficient, or if we don't think it's going to be sufficient, then we don't do anything further, and that's the only thing on the November 17th agenda. My preference would be to do the following: to have A, B, and C on the agenda in this topic. A would be city administrative response to the Planning Commission report and recommendations per Section 708 as tasked by the commissioners, to let him give his full report. Following that, B would be the continuation of or resumption of the public hearing in reference to Charter Section 33. And Section C would be after the public hearing, then we would consider adoption of a resolution to abandon the street. And understanding that if we get the report from Evan on the 17th and it's not satisfying, then we don't continue with the hearing. We defer once more. But if it is satisfying, then we continue with the public hearing. Does that make sense? So those are some options, and I'd like to get feedback, and we'll go to the members of the public too. By the way, Susan, Mike, and Earl are here from the Planning Commission, keeping an eye on us. So they're here if we have any questions, that they're willing to take our questions and respond. Commissioners?
A couple of questions initially. Evan, thank you for the update there. Just for specifics, under the fire marshal's report, you mentioned including surrounding properties. Is that just the three major, the hotels, or is it address anything else along Baltimore Avenue?
Sure, so it would be the adjacent properties and how fire protection standards would be impacted or affected by the surrounding properties. So again, we will provide, I think we previously have provided the fire marshal site plan approval, but the DBF letter will acknowledge essentially what that means. It's important to note that the fire marshal also gives sort of a final approval after the project is done. That is something that is standard for any construction project, is that the fire marshal will come back out after the project is done and issue something after the project's completed.
And you were mentioned also the Rossi will provide rendering efforts for the streetscape design. Just curious, what direction and who supplied the direction to Rossi Group to develop those renderings?
Sure. And I just want to clarify, it's not the streetscape design, it's actually the streetscape concept. This was an effort that the previous city manager had entered into with Rossi. We wanted to have something prepared in order to show the mayor and commissioners, members of the public, what this project looks like integrated with the streetscape. And then also as we reconvene the task force as well, it pretty much gives an idea of what the concept elements look like depicted on the street. So again, we know that we wanted wider travel lanes as we get towards the end of the street. We know that we wanted wide sidewalks, we needed buffer areas, we wanted scooter parking, we wanted bicycle parking, transformers above ground. So it just incorporates those high-level elements for the time being.
Great. And underground utilities?
Yes, so the above-ground transformers are part of the rendering project, so yes.
Well, I haven't seen it, but my expectation is it's just a very rough 3D concept for us to use as a foundation for future discussion. By example, it might have benches in there and it might have lights, but just a generic line or two or something, not a specific design, because the specific design would come out of discussion among the task force. So anything else?
And just also curious if, in doing this, and you may not have an answer, but perhaps you can supply that answer on the meeting on the 17th, how does this, these additional meetings and revisions and decisions impact the schedule for construction?
Before you answer that, I'm so glad you asked that, because I'm a bottom line kind of person, and my follow-up question here was going to be exactly, this project to me feels very uneasy and it feels incomplete at this juncture. So I'm very curious to the answer of where are we right now? Before we turn around, it's going to be December the 1st. And I'm just unclear as to what the reality and the real bottom line is relevant to this building. So whoever's going to answer that.
I did actually happen to meet with Director of Public Works Kevin Williams and J.D. Bartlett from EDIS following one of the Planning Commission meetings last week. Again, I think our major due-outs right now are to draft the ordinances which amend the fire lane section of the code as well as the accessible parking spaces. I think most of the information that was requested by the Planning Commission again, are recommendations that incorporate reports that we can pull together and prepare ahead of the meeting next week. So again, I think that the two things that we have, the city staff is focused on right now are those two ordinances to amend the section of the code. From my previous conversation again with Kevin and EDIS, it sounds like they are prepared to proceed, assuming that the project moves forward on the 17th, and that is, we have the public hearing on Section 33 next week. If we proceed with that route, I believe demolition will start shortly after.
Well, thank you for all that. If it starts, how does it finish in time for the season is really my bottom line.
Right, and
Is it, I guess what I'm trying to get at, Evan, is it even reasonable? I can look at a calendar and come January 1, we've got 120 days, right?
Right.
Before May 1. It just feels like a very, very heavy lift that could become a disaster very quickly.
yeah, so I can say almost with confidence that the first floor of the Beach Patrol headquarters, again, where the restroom facilities will not be completed by the original deadline, which was May 15th. So proceeding, we will have to look at temporary restroom facilities as well as relocating the Beach Patrol for next summer.
Well, don't confuse, the relocating the beach patrol
happen
was in
regardless.
the mix
Correct.
anyhow. That's not an addition
Right.
to this, or that's not caused by the delay. The relocating and public restrooms is.
Correct.
So I don't know. It would be, for me, it would be nice to continue to address this on the 17th with more precise response that if it continues, maybe this report's done at the end, if it continues and we have public hearing and everything's favorable, then what is our realistic time frame? Is there not an opportunity to give them more hours or days somehow that would help? Then again, at the conclusion of our 3 topics there, if it fails or gets postponed and we don't act on it, then we need some answers too that I would like to have contemplated before we go there to say, okay, well, this now causes us to abort, and what are the consequences? I think we need to know all that stuff.
Well, while this is going on, are we in effect not abiding by the contract? Are we being fined? Or when does that kick in?
Can you straighten that out? Because my understanding is that when Lawrence indicated a $1,000 fine, that was actually applicable to the contractor being late on a per diem basis, not the city.
Correct. The $1,000 fine per day references the liquidated damages, which we would impose a $1,000 per day fee or fine for every day that the project was delayed after May 15th. That is, the first floor restroom facilities were not completed by May 15th. For every day thereafter that they're still performing work on those facilities, it would be $1,000 per day. We did have some internal discussions about that. I think the largest impact that we could see from a cost standpoint is going to be, we won't see those costs now with the delay. The contractors indicated that their site manager for the project is on vacation until the project starts. But where we could see some additional costs is going to be supplies and materials. So how the costs of supplies and materials change from the delay that we have seen for the project. Again, that is a cost that we would see in the future as we start to procure supplies and materials for the building.
I think it's very complicated, and that's why I'd like to give more contemplation, and let's be realistic at the next meeting. I mean, there are good reasons to continue the project, right? One is that Rehoboth is getting ready to go there, and they're going to have a new contour or geography to match our new geography for the Beach Patrol. And if we are not first, how do they manage it? Somehow the engineers have to figure that out. Also, the cost, as you mentioned, is going to go up undoubtedly because instead of two off-season mobilizations, there'll be a third. plus the restroom fees. And so to me, there's a lot more logistics to be thought out on what happens if we are able to start on the 17th and what happens if we have to defer. You know, if we choose on the 17th to defer on the public hearing to a future date, then what does that mean? Could we defer it another month and still start the project? Or do we need to say that, that's the fine line we're crossing that puts a stop to it for 1 year? And anything else?
Not right now.
Okay. So with a lot of question marks in the air that we would like to have addressed by the 17th. Anybody else? Any members of the public? Walter, again, state your name and relationship to
Walter
the city.
Bringham, 123 Hennepin Avenue. A different approach typically in construction. For every time there is a penalty, there is also a reward. That's up to you and the solicitor to work out, but the courts have typically come back and say when there are penalties, there need to be rewards. When this started out, it started out as good intent, and it still needs to proceed on. When City Hall was, first of all, the public has not really had opportunity for input, which will come. You'll take care of that because you have to. But one of the things that the Public Works Director said, we can talk about the site plan, et cetera, but not about the building. So one of the things that comes up is view or view field. And I want to tell you a real quick story about right here at Convention Hall. There's a generator out back, and we kept telling everybody that it wasn't sufficient. And because you have an emergency operations center here, there was a requirement that the whole thing have a security fence around it. And there was quite a bit of controversy about it, but in the end, we had to do it. Changing subjects, but close, Agave, a couple of us got into it. They proposed the gas tanks for Agave on the other side of the alley. So we protested to the fire marshal's office, and the fire marshal's office came back and said that they can put them any place they want. When we come back for final inspection, which typically is they've got the Cisco truck there delivering food, and if it hasn't been right, we turn them down. They can't open. You need to think about that. We also had that happen here at City Hall because through errors and omissions, there was no gas plan for the kitchen. So there was thousands of dollars extra to get the gas tanks out here in the side yard, piped across the building and into the kitchen. When I asked about it and came back, and the fire marshal's office told me that eminent domain applies to the city of Rehoboth Beach. The city of Rehoboth Beach, other than the fire marshal's inspection, is going to do the inspection on this building. And the fire marshal's office can come in some cases because they are the state, and you should have continuing inspections so that you don't have a problem at the last minute. So of relevance is if you come out of Dewey Beach on Route 1 northbound, there was a generator placed years ago at the State Road lift station, and all of a sudden said, that's a terrible view field. That great big yellow thing, the fuel tank is underneath it. And then the city went out and paid for landscaping. And Liz could probably tell us how much it would cost to put landscaping around it. So my point is, so long to get there, based on the prints that I've seen, by the way, the artwork downstairs in the lobby is very nice. It's been done very professionally. But you look at when you stand at the west end of the facility and look towards the ocean, the generator stands to the left of the building. But when you look at the prints, the transformer and everything, utility interfaces are on the right-hand side of the building. Mr. Mayor, and to the Public Works Director, people didn't want any comments about the building, but if you're going to have a view field that you create, then you'll turn around that generator that sits out there on the left side as you look down the street, you're going to put trees around it. You're going to further obscure the view field. So when you come to the hearing, the people need to see how it really looks and have an opportunity to speak. No differently than as proposed with the options, not knowing what you've done or intend to do. I can't see that you build a new building and don't completely finish the inside of the building, paint the walls, et cetera, put the ceilings in, that it be built right. But the view shed is something, everything's a change. And to plant the generator over on the left side, that means that all the cables that come from primary from Delmarva Power or whoever is the supplier, they might be the delivering agency, have to go all the way across the building to a transfer switch someplace, and then come back to where the utility room is in the facility. So I encourage you to slow up and look at these things and don't take just what I said. There's a lot of people that are frustrated and say why, and I said, unless you come to the meeting, nobody will know. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Walter. You mentioned, and Evan mentioned, that the fire marshal does a final inspection, and that's well and good, but I would sure hope that we do our best, everybody does their best to meet with fire marshal standards before we even start construction. So thank you, Walter.
Let me just say one thing. The fire marshal, when I spoke with them, they didn't do a test. They have authority to do a test. They weren't requested. The last I heard, fire trucks still hadn't gone up and down the street. You can do that on the pictures. But the fire marshal's office doesn't care anything about beer trucks or vegetable trucks. They only care about the fire trucks. Can they get down the street? So you need to be thinking about that. You can draw all the pictures in the world, but basically the whole end of the street, in my estimation, if they comply with the law, there will be no parking down the end of the street. And this past summer was an example. You had so few policemen, you were not able to adequately patrol the town. And so who's going to ticket the vegetable trucks and the beer trucks?
Thank you, Walter. Mike, did you have to say something? Are you saying it on behalf of yourself?
I have to say on
Planning?
behalf of myself, even though I'm a member of the Planning Commission, because the Planning Commission you have
Well, we have the report. I really don't think it's appropriate to reiterate points in the report at this point, but Mike knows I want you again at the November 17th meeting or something. But if you have personal comments, come on up. Just state your name and relationship to the city.
Michael Strange, 4 Stokely Street. I'm also a member of the Planning Commission, but I'm not speaking here on behalf of the Planning Commission because you have our report. The only thing I would ask, just as a general comment, has anyone actually seen the video of that meeting? Okay, at least 2 people. I was very outspoken at that meeting, and I was extremely concerned with regard to this particular development. No one questions the need. That, I think, is a foregone conclusion. We know we need to do something. The question is, though, how does that something manifest itself in such a way that the city of Rehoboth Beach and the local residents are not facing an increased risk because of the nature of how and where it was done in the context of our assignment, which was removing some of the public property, in this case, the street. And although the discussion here has been with regard to those surrounding properties specifically, every citizen in Rehoboth Beach has an undivided interest in everything that the city of Rehoboth Beach owns, and that includes the roadways. And what I talked about at that particular meeting, And I think it's important to note that under our zoning code, under 270, the city doesn't have to pay any attention to that. They're specifically exempted. But you'd have to be crazy not to pay attention to it and not build things according to state, federal, and codes that are enforced by the building inspector. Having said that, higher standards, which is the part of under one of our provisions under the building code, is sometimes higher standards apply than what are stated within our building code. But it has to be based on the science. It can't be based on just preference. It can't be that Mike Strange or the mayor or anybody else says, well, I really don't like that. That's not good enough. You have to have factual documentation based on what the science says is the appropriate thing to do. You can follow the building code explicitly with this building and still end up with an unsafe building from the standpoint of the surroundings around it. And it's very easy to happen. I can give you a couple of examples where things like that have occurred within the state, where something was about to be built, passed all the codes, was signed off by all the engineers, and before it was completed, it started to fail, and it became obvious. It turns out that was the original Indian River Inlet design for the bridge, and it was before I worked for Del.C. And we were driving down, and my wife and I saw them building the abutments, and I said, you gotta be kidding me. It's not gonna work. It's impossible. And I made the fatal mistake of saying, well, they must know what they're doing. All the engineers signed off on it. And as you all recall, most of you recall, about a month or two later, they started to sink. And that was due to liquefaction. That was signed off by the engineers at Del.C. It was signed off by a company that was well known for building bridges safely. Ended up finally going into litigation, and I don't know what the amount of money was, and it was eliminated, and a whole new bridge went up. Totally different design, because the first design failed. I don't know if the current design will fail in its entirety, but from what we knew so far, which was quite frankly very little, and from the public perspective, we don't have enough details to know if it does put the city as a generality and its population at risk because of the inherent design and the vacation of that amount of roadway. There are other issues came up, which a few people have already alluded to, were alluded at that meeting, of concerns. And my concern was, with currently what's going on, it may meet the code, but I'm not sure it's sufficient to provide a safe establishment. I think we all agree we need more restrooms for the public. We need greater facilities for beach patrol to do their job. But the manifestation that was currently done, we can't come to a conclusion if in fact it is the safest, best solution. There may have to be alterations based on facts and science. And I should put out also with regard to the fire inspector, he makes his determinations based on the standards and the code. But it goes back again to what I stated earlier. You can do things sequentially within code, but when you add up the totality, it ends up to be a very safe environment. That's published fact. That's not just me making it up. And you can look at any of the scientific journals that refer to that phenomenon. And there's other examples, more than just the Indian River Inlet Bridge, that have occurred societally that people are aware of. And I don't think we want to go forward because of the speed issue and the fact that we may have to have another year where we have to have temporary bathrooms, when if we go blindly into the current plan, there is in fact a very significant potential for risk that will manifest itself later down. And I think that would be a very bad situation for the city and for the citizens collectively if we do in fact have something occur negatively and we say, oh my God, we should have thought about that. Why didn't we consider it? And someone could say, well, it met the code. That's not enough. It's not enough, especially when the science can help us evaluate this proposal with all the aspects and then say, okay, does it sum up to be a successful project, or are we building in inherent risk? And that's where I'm coming from, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else?
If I may, I have one question, since thank you for Planning Commission to be here and appreciate the report and the speed in which this report was prepared and returned to us. And I'm just curious if you could address the point E, a possible zoning designation for the RBP building, and it says recommendations, consider open space or municipal building. And I'm just curious if during the CDP discussions and development in the most recent CDP, was that discussed at all for the other municipal buildings or open space in the city? Do you recall of that conversations?
You have a page number on that?
It's the page 13, the very last point.
The very last point.
With regard to the creation of CDP?
Point E, Edward, yeah. Right there, it says, recommends the Board of Commissioners consider whether to designate the new RBP building with a specific zoning classification such as O1 open space or simply, quote, municipal building. I'm just curious if that overall arching theme had been addressed in the development of the CDP, because we have other municipal buildings throughout the city and other open space. So I just was trying to look at some background.
I don't recall if that, quite frankly, was brought up during
Okay.
that. One of the difficulties that we had toward the end of the CDP, it was started before we had the lockdown and COVID. That went into effect, and everything then was done remotely, which made it difficult because you lost a lot of the salience that you would have in a public meeting. And it's very hard to do things sequentially, which is essentially what happened when we're doing it. But I do not recall if that explicitly was brought up at all. In fact, although my memory is not what it used to be, I'm tending to think that that was not a topic of concern at that point. In light of this one, when we were looking at it, I think it's now brought up an issue that perhaps it should be designated in some other way that is more appropriate within the city. But that's the only time it really came up at the Planning Commission, was in the light of this application.
I was just curious because we tend to look at things either myopically or band-aiding, and I don't want to go down that road if
Right.
we're not looking at it in its entirety.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Thank you. I was going to say, you saw really a lot of very broad. You saw a lot of very broad responses, and that was because we didn't have anything to work with. Right. And that in and of itself creates very, very serious problems because you're talking without context, and that's dangerous to say the least.
Thank you, Mike. With that, if it's all right, then we'll, on the 17th, we'll move forward with that program to start off with city administrative response to the Planning Commission report, and then that'll allow us time to have a conversation. And then we'll put on the agenda also continuation of the public hearing, and then after that, consideration of adoption of a resolution to vacate that end of the street, which again, B and C, as I call them, if we are not satisfied with the report and we need to, we can defer on conducting the public hearing. But again, part of that report to the Planning Commission, at the end, we need to hear more from Evan on timeframe and what happens if we defer, what happens if we postpone a year, what happens, et cetera. Anybody else? All right.
I guess I just have an observation, having watched the Planning Commission, and thank you for the report and the work. If I read between the lines, for me, it sounds like we need to start again on this project. You didn't say that exactly, but with limited information, that was my takeaway, was that you didn't have enough information to make a fair judgment on what's going on here. And I brought it up once before, and rather than spending city resources and time, do we need to start this project again? Because for many of us, and I think it was brought up in the Planning Commission meeting, this idea of vacating part of Baltimore Avenue was somewhat news after 2 years to us, did everybody else remember the road being an issue until recently?
No.
So I'm wondering whether, rather than us trying to Band-Aid this thing, do we need to start this again? Start the project again and do it correctly?
I'd like to, I guess I'd like to go the path that I just articulated, and at that time, make that decision, Tim, with public input.
But hopefully we would also, I don't disagree with you, Commissioner Bennett, but I think one of the factors we also are not fully aware of, and again, it's a very short period of time between now and the 17th, but the financial impact of either waiting or if we push forward with this on a escalated time frame, is the EDIS going to be able to produce that? I mean, are they, with abilities and ordering of materials and all of this information that, again, we're not privileged to and we don't need to be, but those are the responses that we're responsible for. And that time frame of money, of ability, quality of product, talking about temporary restrooms, where do you find them, where do you put them, how do you maintain them, the laydown area for the building, the impact of the end of Baltimore Avenue with the season going on. Again, those are questions that need to be addressed, but I don't see at this point that we have if you will, a logical step to get there or to answer those questions in a proper manner. So a deeper discussion, and I don't know if that can be accomplished by the 17th.
What do you think on timeline?
At the very least, I'd like to reach out to DBF, EDIS, and maybe Delmarva Veteran Builders if there's a representative from the company that would be able to attend next Friday and have them all here, certainly to address some of these comments and concerns.
I support all of the conversations that need to take place. What continues to bother me is a very simple answer to the question, have we already passed the date that would have enabled us to be successful? And everything I see, everything I read, everything I hear is making me question whether or not we have already passed a critical date that's going to lock us into some kind of corner in a very, very, very short order. So I think it boils down to a question that I think Commissioner Bennett has said a couple of times before, and it's the bottom line. What are we going to do about this building? It's as simple as that.
Well, I think a lot of it's going to come down to our response and public response to city administration's response to the Planning Commission. Because if we're not satisfied, that may end it right there. So we'll design a program to try to present all this stuff. If we can shoot for the 17th, otherwise we've got to do a special meeting.
Sure.
So let me work with Evan on timeline and everything. Keep you informed. Anything else?
I'm afraid so, yes. Commissioner Sharp, you use the term define success. And or use the term to do this in success. I don't know that we have a clear term of what is success. Is it the functional building, or it is the perception of the building completed and the whole workings around it and looking at we've met the code, but does that really meet the criteria of what we want this building and what it serves and who it serves to fulfill? Just a lot of questions, and I go back again to to Commissioner Bennett, and is it time to just regroup? And I've always been challenged by the calendar and the clock as opposed to getting the right thing done in the right manner. So we'll move on to the next topic. Thank you.
Just one comment. Mayor, you mentioned our response, how we react to the staff's responses to the Planning Commission. And the thing that strikes me about that is, and the potential that could cause us to pause if we're not satisfied. The thing that strikes me about that, though, is that we have a Planning Commission that has told us that actually what they gave us is not even satisfactory to them because what they were given to respond to wasn't sufficient for the work that they do. So our staff's reaction to a planning commission that's giving us, not their best work, is that what we should be doing? I mean, should we be taking the time to do that, or should we just get directly to answering Commissioner Bennett's question? I don't know, but hearing Mike say what he said today was compelling to me.
I don't know, I've outlined a path forward that I'd like to do, and so I think it could be settled on the 17th. But I think we need to go to the 17th and hear responses. I don't want to get into it all again, but,
And I want to make sure that I'm understanding, Evan, the things that you are leading to put together for the 17th. The intent of that, if I'm reading this correctly and understanding it correctly, is that we're attempting to fill in the gaps that the Planning Commission is very clear that they did not have clarity on or enough information. So we're trying to backfill everything that we didn't do in a more forward way. Am I correct about that?
Maybe to an extent. So
Okay.
the recommendations that the Planning Commission provided certainly are for some additional rendering, some additional information, reports and things like that that we can gather, documentation of meetings that we've had or outreach efforts, things like that. One of the things that I want to mention to Mike Streen's comment about how they didn't have enough information, and I know this was mentioned by a member of the Planning Commission in the meeting, the last sentence of the provision within the state code says that the Planning Commission shall have the full power to make such investigations, maps, and reports and recommendations in connection therewith, relating to any of the subjects referred to under this section as it deems desirable. If the Planning Commission feels as though we lacked in the information that we gave them, all we need to know is what information the Planning Commission needs from us, and we would be more than happy to provide that information.
But, Mayor, that then brings us back to Commissioner Bennett's question.
But I think the reality is, on the 17th, we're going to hear some clarifying information from the city staff. We're going to hear from the public, and we're going to make a decision whether we feel comfortable with vacating a portion of the street, whether we feel as though the design is adequate, or we don't. And we go back to whoever, did the plans and say, we don't want to vacate this much of the street. We, start from scratch with a new design. I mean, those are the two options going forward, correct?
I think there are probably gradations that would multiply that a little bit, in terms of options. As others have mentioned, I'm very pleased, let's say, of the response that we've gotten from the Planning Commission and even members of the audience having us be concerned and wary of the requirements of the building and whether or not that if we can assess to the best that we can do, that we are moving forward with a good plan and with a good package, and it's going to fulfill largely what we hope the building to do. But I'm just looking at this. If we were a bunch of belligerent people who we had a state requirement for the Planning Commission to submit a report, and then we could just summarily ignore it. We could have done that. We can do that. We can do that if you want. I'm not suggesting that. And I think I would like to think that the plan in place at the moment is that we be introspective and look at the information we have and decide, do you think we have enough to go on or don't we? I mean, I just feel that I don't feel we have enough information at this moment. I think hopefully that will coalesce at our meeting on the 17th, and we'll see what happens. But I do feel, though, that we've been advised and given good advice, and that we can take it from there, so.
Well, I'm going to agree with Commissioner Cherkowski that it all hinges on the 17th, and we can take a moment to really ponder it before then and make a final decision on that day, if it works out that way.
Thank you. All righty. Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to the next item of new business, which is presentation by Ann Womack, City Secretary, on the city's legislative portal and document center.
Good morning, everybody. This is a quick tutorial of the portal and the document center and how to navigate it. The current photograph or picture that you see on the screens is of the city website. That's probably the easiest way to get into the portal. Below the rotating photographs, you can see Civic Web Legislative Portal. It's in green and white. You click on that, and it'll take you into the portal. You're now on the home page of the portal, and you'll see underneath the photograph of City Hall, it says Home Calendar Meeting Search. There's a calendar off to the right-hand side, which is a little one. You can click on that to see what meetings are coming up. The calendar below is actually the bigger portion of it, and it'll expand on the dates. It will give you the times and the dates of the meetings. Whereas the calendar on the right-hand side, this is basically to say that, okay, this one, for instance, Environment Committee and Streets and Transportation, they have a meeting coming up. There are no agendas attached to that, so I cannot click into that meeting. Below that, you'll see today's meeting. It lists the meetings for today, any upcoming meetings, any recent meetings where we've had those live streamed. If you go down the page, you'll see Meet Your Commissioners. And if you click on that, it will take you to the page that gives a bio of the mayor and commissioners and how long their terms are. Going back to the home page, we also have a search area, subscribe area. That's for anybody that wants to subscribe to any of the meetings. Citizen engagement. I will take you into subscribe first. Subscribe lists out all of the committees, commissions, and boards, and all you would have to do is just click on each box that you would like to receive notification of the meetings, and then go down to the page, put in your email address, let it know that you're not a robot, and then you subscribe, and it automatically subscribes you. And once I send out the agendas or minutes or whatever, then you will automatically be included. Citizen engagement. This is where the board applications, if you go in, a board application can be created. Anybody that wants to apply for a board, commission, or committee, the application is here, and you click on I'm not a robot, you submit it, and I automatically get it. Once I receive it, I give it to the mayor, and he adds it to all of the other applications that we have. FOIA request application, anybody requesting information from, say, building and licensing, a property owner would like to have a survey of their next door neighbor's property. They fill out a FOIA request, which here is the application. This is all completed, same thing, I'm not a robot, submit it, and it automatically comes into me. I then make a hard copy of it and submit it to building and licensing for them to fulfill the FOIA request. Once that request is fulfilled, the building and licensing sends me the original request, because I have in action tracking, which is another portion, I have a document log mandated by the governor that I must fill out for each FOIA request, stating the name, the address, who's requesting, what the request is for, and so forth. Then we'll go into the meetings. And this one it's hesitant about loading right away. No, it wasn't too bad this morning. This list, I have boxes for each, for the press releases that I do, the public notices, whether they be Board of Adjustment, Parks and Shade Tree, Mayor and Commissioners, Planning Commission. Then I go into the Mayor and Commissioners regular meeting, which lists out the meetings that have occurred. And also you'll see it also lists out view agenda archives and view minute archives. Those are housed in the document center. So I can click on one of these. This is the October 20th meeting, and you will see it takes you right to the agenda page. All the documents are embedded in there. There's a video of it because the meeting was live streamed. And then below it, you can click on just the agenda if you'd like to just print that, or you can print out the whole entire agenda packet. Depending on how many documents are attached to the agenda, it takes a little while for it to load. So now you're in where you can actually download it or you can print it out, and we'll do the proclamation for breast cancer. And one click takes you to that embedded document. Then you can go back up and get out of that, or if you go into the agenda packet, instead of clicking on that, you can scroll down and you will see every single document that's embedded to that agenda. Now, this is a meeting that does not have the approved minutes yet. So aside of the video button, when the minutes are approved, after the meeting where they are approved at, then it shows up that the minutes are ready for the public to review, or view, I should say, because they've already been approved. But this is a meeting that we recently had, so they've not been approved yet. Going into the search section, you can search any word that you would like to. Let's see. These are every single document, and it may not only be a document, it could also be the live stream where either partitioning was used in the document or it was stated at a meeting. And you can see at the bottom that it lists out 10 pages that you can go back into any document that it's referring to. And then you can also do an advanced search. You can hone it down a little bit. And then you can do the order results by relevance or by the date created or by the title, if you happen to know the title. And if you want to go descending or if you want to go in an ascending list of. So that's the search portion of it. So now I'll take you into the document center, which you click on in the upper right-hand corner. It says Document Center. These are all the folders that I presently have. Agendas, for instance. Any agenda that's published in iCompass automatically goes into the Document Center. Those agendas, we started this program back in 2016. And each agenda has been automatically published to the Document Center. Now what we're doing is I have a very good woman that's working with me right now. Her name is Tanya. She's a temp, and she is going back in and scanning the agendas, the minutes, the resolutions, and the ordinances prior to 2005, all the way back to 1896 for the mayor and commissioners. We're presently in the 1960s. Once that's complete, I will make it public and everybody will be able to see all those documents. Like I said, we're back to in the 1960s. It's a big task. She's been phenomenal with all the scanning that she's been doing for me. Once the mayor and commissioners are complete with the regular meetings, special meetings, and also the workshop meetings, we're going to go on to the Board of Adjustment meetings and do the same thing there, and also the Planning Commission meetings. That way, anybody has any questions or would just like to bebop around in the document center, they can find all kinds of information. Currently, we have over 20,000 documents in the portal and the document center.
Is that searchable by text or
Yes.
is it just a PDF? Oh,
Yep.
all right, okay.
So here we have, I'm in the agendas, and then here we have the mayor and commissioners. This is a special meeting. And you'll see 2023, and it goes back to 2005. Prior to that, I've not made public yet, so, because I'm coordinating the agendas with the minutes, and if there were any resolutions or ordinance that also need to be coordinated. But all of these, actually from 2006 to 2023, were actually generated by the iCompass program. Once I do an agenda and I hit publish, it automatically is sent out to whoever is subscribing, and it's automatically placed into the document center, along with the agenda page. You'll notice that there's the Atlantic Crown Hotel project, the Beach Patrol Building project, Beach Walk. These are different projects that have occurred. Also, cases with the court system. We have clear space, comprehensive development plan, ordinances, minutes, press releases that I've done for meetings, public notices, resolutions, the Stormwater Utility Task Force, the Wilmington-Baltimore Task Force, and the zoning map is also in there. One thing that I did want to say was getting back into the portal. On the home page, if you scroll all the way to the bottom of the home page, there are quick links there. We have the comp plan, the 2010. We have the status update of the 2015. And we also have the adopted 2020 comp plan listed there. You can also click on and view the municipal code, which takes you right into the electronic version of it. You'll also see the charter. Currently, there are no new laws. I've not sent anything over to them recently. When I do send an ordinance over, it automatically goes into that new laws before it's placed into the code, because the editors have to have a little bit of time to review what we send over. So they automatically put the adopted ordinances into new laws in case anybody would like to see those. This is the page for the comp plan that was recently adopted. And you'll see here every single draft that have been done and the meetings that were held. Special memos on different topics and that type of thing. So that's pretty much it on the public side of the portal, the part that everybody reviews, or I should say views. The portion that I go into is a little bit more extensive because of generating the agendas and the minutes and embedding documents and that kind of thing. So are there any questions that anybody has?
I think I get it.
You think?
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing along as you've.
Well, it's very user-friendly. It really is.
Yeah.
Thank you, and it takes a lot of energy to create it, but even more energy to maintain it. You've done a fantastic job. Of the 57 municipalities in Delaware, I would swear by ours being the best support document program, the best communication program statewide, hands down. So, and that a large part is due to Ann's knowledge of the systems and being able to keep it maintained. Any members of the public want to say anything? Nope. Thank you. They're all nodding. Yes, they agree with me. Very good.
Mayor, before you move on, can you remind me of something? Before you became such a champion of support documents, how was it done? Was it done electronically for the meetings, or was it just a completely paper-driven?
I can answer that.
Yes, Ann, help me.
Because I actually do have some agendas that were earlier.
Yes.
That we actually did the support documents in actual hard copy. So, but they are on there too, the ones that we did. But we actually did, and it wasn't an attachment or an embedment. It was separate, where all of the documents were in this support document packet.
Well, that's what I was just sitting here wondering. You know, I can't figure out how anybody found anything in the past when it was all just hard copy, paper-driven, and before...
we didn't start this program until 2016.
I know.
Yeah.
I know, because...
So in order to be able to find anything...
Yes.
You would have to call me up or come see me, and I would have to go into the minute books.
And physically look
Yes.
for it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my goodness. Well, now I understand why Mayor Mills was such an advocate of electronic support documents.
Absolutely.
And it's really turned out to be quite an efficient way to do things.
Yeah.
Thank you, both of you, for that.
Thank you, thank you. All right, thank you, Ann, appreciate it. When you get settled, I want to be back on the screen, please. I would, please. I lost my attorney. Well, we'll try starting this. The next item of new business is discuss liaison position with respect to the Rehoboth Beach Historic Society and agreement allowing for a commissioner to sit on its board. Yes, I'm on the screen right there. So I'd like to preface this topic with just having a discussion of liaison positions in particular, okay? In particular, at the bottom of the support document is a question, what is the propriety of commissioner liaisons? Or what is the propriety of any commissioner sitting on boards of organizations that have a relationship with the city? That's what I want to address before I go on to our main topic. So let's just take a review here. We have 5 liaisons. Liaisons are appointed positions by the commissioners, and they are literally liaison between the city and the organization. We have a liaison for the Rehoboth Beach Chamber of Commerce, and I was appointed that, so I work with Carol. And as you know, when we have liaison reports, the preference is that the representative from that agency is here and gives it, but the liaison would be able to step in and present information in the absence of the representative of that agency. So again, I'm appointed liaison to the Rehoboth Beach Chamber of Commerce. We also have a liaison for the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society. That position is vacant right now. If you recall, it was held by appointed then Commissioner Jay Legree. I self-appointed myself as temporary liaison, understanding that I just go there and put forward any information that they have, but I am not appointed in that position. Rehoboth Beach Main Street is also a liaison position, and Commissioner Ed Chernowski is their long-term liaison to that. Cape and Lopin Senior Center is also Commissioner Chernowski. And then recently we added a position for liaison for the Rehoboth Beach Public Library. And I want to make a clarification here. The liaison for the Rehoboth Beach Public Library is Commissioner Gossett. We also appointed 2 task force members, and those are Commissioner Gossett and Commissioner Market, so that we don't get those backwards or intertwined. And so I made a note here of which groups receive donations from the city. That would be the Historical Society, that would be Main Street, and that would be the Public Library. So that's important to know in this conversation. Also important to know is the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society has a city agreement that allows for a commission to be on the board. I'll read it to you. This is an agreement between the city and the museum or the Historical Society to use that property and turn it into a museum. Item number 21 of this agreement says the Historical Society agrees that one member of the Commissioners of Rehoboth Beach shall be a member of the Board of Directors of the Historical Society, to have full vote and voice on the Board of Directors of the Historical Society during the term of this agreement and renewal or extension thereof. Said member shall be chosen by the mayor of the city. Again, this is in the agreement. And so what generated this topic for me is that the Historical Society is in the middle of making some decisions on, big decisions on things. And they're looking for, different groups are looking for support of their board members. And they got wind of this and said that they've never had a commissioner appointed to a board position. Not talking about liaison position, but board position. And they would like to, they would have mentioned to me getting somebody on board. And I have brought this forward. Oh, let me skip down here. Also, the past liaisons were board members of the Senior Center. Mayor Cooper and Commissioner Byrne were liaison and also sat as board members on those agencies. Commissioner Stronowski, you have sat as board member and vice president on Rehoboth Beach Main Street while you were a liaison. And so with the thought of the Historical Society wanting a commissioner to sit on their board, whether it's the liaison or not, I wanted to have a conversation with you all because while it may be legal to do that, it presents some potential ethical problems. And so ultimately, I would prefer that this agreement was changed to remove that. But also I would like to perhaps set a policy or at least voice my opinion out loud that liaisons or any commissioners should not be sitting on any of these groups. Why? Because while it's legal, and Glenn will give us his take on it, while it's legal, to me the weight of your position as a commissioner should be carried forth. In other words, you sit on one of these agencies and you sit on the board and you vote on a budget, particularly a budget where you're asking for money in front of the commissioners, then you necessarily need to sit out that conversation and recuse yourself from when the commissioners bring it forward. And again, it's just my position that if you're an elected commission, the weight should be on that position, and you should not be sitting on one of these agencies. Now, just my support document at the bottom mentions the fire company is also a group that comes in front of us seeking funding, but they don't have a liaison. So again, Glenn, if you could give your position on the propriety of commissioner liaisons and any commissioner sitting on boards of organizations that have a relationship with the city. Maybe it even applies to the Rehoboth Beach Homeowners Association. They don't ask for any money from the city. They do give opinions on things to the city, but maybe commissioners should not be sitting on that agency also. So let's go to
Mayor, can I
Glenn.
ask just one question?
Yes, sir.
What year was that agreement signed with the Historical Society?
2002.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. So I've had to look at this a few times for different jurisdictions over the years, and this really falls back to the state code of conduct. Remember, the city does not have its own code of conduct, so you all are subject to the state code of conduct. State code of conduct says that no state employee, state officer, honorary state official may participate. And remember, when it says state employee or state officer, by virtue of being a subsidiary or a political subdivision of the state, you fall under this. No state employee, state officer, or honorary state official may participate on behalf of the state in the review or disposition of any matter pending before the state in which the state employee, state officer, or honorary state official has a personal or private interest. So you start at, first question is, do you have a personal or private interest when you serve on a board? The Public Integrity Commission, which hears ethics complaints at the state level, has said in ethics opinion number 02-22 that board membership on a private enterprise is a personal and private interest. So by virtue of serving on a board, and they've extended that to not just for-profit organizations, but nonprofits as well. So by virtue of serving on a board, there is a personal or private interest that's created. And the reason they've said is they've said, like, once you are on that board, you have an obligation to look out for the interests of that board. And the conflict comes into play when you also have, by virtue of sitting on this board, you also have an obligation to look out for the interests of this board as well. So you can do, like the mayor says, it's legal. You can sit on a board of a private institution and on this board of commissioners. The problem becomes when that private board is appearing before this commission and asking for a donation or asking for some sort of accommodation, and then you as a member of the commission are seeking to meet your obligations to both organizations, and it's sometimes in conflict to do what's in the best interest of the city and to do what's in the best interest of the board upon which you're sitting. So that's where the conflict arises. It's possible to serve on both, but you just have to be wary and aware of the potential for a conflict. So I do think there are circumstances where a conflict can arise.
Thank
So,
you.
Glenn, if that agreement was signed in 2002, would that language that you just read to us, would that have already been in place at that time?
This opinion was 02-22, so it would have been right around that time. It would have happened in 2002, this opinion.
It's interesting that it didn't seem to hold much water with previous commissions.
Yeah, I can see the benefits of both sides, to be honest with you. I can see that having a member of the commission on these certain boards gives this commission the ability to influence certain things that happen around the city with those boards. But the downside is there's a potential for a conflict, and if you're not being mindful of it all the time, you can get in trouble, as the State and Public Integrity Commission has said. So, but right, I mean, I don't know when this came out compared to when that agreement was signed, but it was right around the same time.
Thank you.
Well, and understand, 20-some years ago, since this was signed 20-some years ago, apparently there's never been a contemplation of putting a commissioner on the board. It's only surfaced now because of their interest to have a full board with city representation to be able to vote on certain topics that are coming up. And my concern is the optics of this. While it might be legal, I think under too many circumstances that ethics could be called into question. And I would just rather remove that from the opportunity to do that improperly. So I would like to amend this agreement. That's not a big deal, is it? To strike item number 21, where the Historical Society agrees that one member of the commissioners shall be a member of the board of directors.
Mayor, do we know if other such agreements exist with other organizations in the city that have such a?
The Cape and Lopin Senior Center does not have an agreement. The chamber certainly does not, correct? Historical Society, the fire company does not. And while Sam Cooper was a board member of the Senior Center and Commissioner Dick Byrne was, Ed is not. In fact, they told me that Ed's too young, apparently, to be on the board, serve the board of the Senior Center. So he's off the hook there. But
I might have hit that threshold
Uh-oh.
recently, actually.
50 years old.
Mayor, can I ask what the point of the liaisons are anyway?
Just
Because, and I'll preface it with, the chamber comes here and gives a report, Main Street comes and gives a report. I don't think we've ever seen anyone from the other two. The library has just started because of the issues with moving.
right.
But if they're not sitting on the board, if there is a conflict of interest, why do we even have liaisons?
That's a good question. I see value in it in that they come here and are able to answer questions. Now, interestingly,
Who answers questions?
the liaison, if they if Carol comes up here and says something, we can ask her questions.
I understand that, but we don't ask you the
The last
question.
2 meetings, you've got the opportunity to, though. Now, the fire company used to come in person all the time, and the police. And I guess with COVID, we stopped that and it never resumed. I don't know if that,
Do we have in writing any policy or procedure that describes the roles and responsibilities of a liaison?
no, I'm inherited all this.
Well, I'm not accusing, I'm just curious that, you know, you're appointed liaison and it's like, what are you supposed to do kind of thing? And that goes back to the purpose or the role of, is it a good use of time? Is it a good use of both organizational time and commissioner's time? I don't know if that's a bigger question. I mean, what you're talking about right now is board service, and I understand that. But I think also, as Commissioner Bennett brought up, the term of a liaison and its credibility or its the expectations.
Yeah, it's capacity. What are they supposed to be doing?
My question is, I mean, I think that there ought to be some kind of relationship with these organizations, you know, with us. And it's just a matter of framing that, how you want to accomplish that. I don't necessarily think that, being on the board and having either a voting or non-voting role is critical, although I do feel that if we're giving money to an organization and we decide that, you know, a liaison position is to be created or something like that, I think we ought to, we have to, I think, have to craft guidelines with regard to the level of access that we get. I think we need to be able to speak at their board meetings, but, you know, either attend their board meetings, either as in the audience or whatever, or sit with them, or however they want to frame that. But, you know, that we have to impart to them, if there's some kind of thing that they're doing or planning on doing that I don't think is fitting, or you know, that one of us as a liaison would feel would not be fitting or whatever. I mean, even if we can't speak or whatever, we're going to come back here, and I think we're going to want to have that on the you know, agenda. You know, that, hey, they're planning on doing this, I don't think it's such a good idea, that kind of thing, you know. But I think that's like the benefit of it is basically to have, you know, a seat at the table, whether or not it's you know, necessarily voting or not, or something like that. And I think that would bypass a lot of the you know, the possibilities of you know, being improper or something like that, you know, with the
Well, if I understood you right, I'll accept your offer to work with me on criteria for being a liaison. Is that all right?
Sure.
All right.
Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we have a member of one of the affected organizations in the audience. From the user standpoint, would you mind sharing with us your description or role of the liaison?
So, Carol Everhart, Rehoboth Beach, Dewey Beach Chamber of Commerce. Our bylaws state that we can have anyone come and speak to the board, anyone. You want a place on the board, or make a statement to the board, ask the board something, anyone can do that. I just simply need to schedule it. The importance of the liaison to me is, if I cannot be here, I have someone to go to and say, here's the information I would have given if I could have been there. And the other part is, it's the connection. You know, it's a connection. If we don't have a liaison for all the groups, we're all going to be calling Stan. If you don't have someone that you're working with, they don't have to be a voting member, okay? I think sitting on a board doesn't necessarily require having a vote, but you need to know what's going on if you're representing the organization. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, Carol, I think the connection with the city is very important, and that's why I like having a liaison, to have a connection with the city, with the group. Your first comment, I guess, could be If you can't be there, then you could send Megan or Meredith or somebody, you know, so that could possibly be taken out.
That
So
could be
the
taken care
more
of by a
weight is
staff
on.
member. Yes,
Yeah.
it could be.
Right.
But it's, I think the connection is important. Is it absolute? No. But I think it's important for someone on your group who's voting to know what's going on firsthand.
Well, sometimes the different agencies run ideas by the liaison. Hey, what do you think of this or something? Because I need that city perspective. And so you know who to go to, your own liaison. Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome.
Carol number 2. Carolyn, I'm sorry.
Carolyn Diefendorfer, city resident. Full disclosure, I am a volunteer for Main Street, and I am considered a non-voting member of their board. But I think it's good having a liaison because even though I come to most of the meetings and I know what's going on in the city, there aren't a lot of other people here, so the organizations get a feel for what's going on in the city. The other thing is I want to point out, you all just appointed a library liaison because you got caught off guard. So by having a liaison, if there's things going on that impact the city, that liaison's going to hear about it before it comes before you and you're caught off guard by something. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Mayor, I'll give my perspective, because I guess I'm the liaison for 2 organizations, and they're both very different. My interaction with them are very different. With the senior center, I check in with them and get more information. Do they have a pancake breakfast coming up? Where are you at with the redevelopment of the new center that they want to build out on Hepron Road, et cetera? Because that at some point will affect the city and the property that they currently are in. So, it's basically them keeping me up to date of what they have going on, which I think is helpful. But my relationship with Main Street is very different in that I will keep them informed of agenda topics that might affect downtown businesses, outdoor dining, stuff like that. So I think it's helpful to have that perspective and to have that involvement with the organizations. But it's not a one-size-fits-all. They're a little different, each of them.
Thank you. Well, I don't intend to make any changes unless others bring it up.
Mayor, the only question or ask if you and Commissioner Markert are going to work on a criteria or something of that nature. Also address it from the other standpoint of if you could review or develop what is the criteria for an organization to have a liaison. We have, the Chamber and Historical Society, Main Street, Senior Center, Public Library. Are there other organizations out there that should have a liaison, and what criteria does the city establish to, if you will, qualify or have that communication link? So just look at both sides of it.
Sure. 2 facets to it. Thank you. Anybody else?
So where are we really on this commissioners sitting on the board? Did I miss that?
I don't know whether you want to make a policy or just have an awareness of it. I would like to act on amending the agreement so that we understand and the Historical Society understands that there will be no commissioners appointed by the mayor to a board seat on the Historical Society. I would like to carry that through. Otherwise, would entertain your suggestions on what to do otherwise. Is it sufficient that we just mentioned it today?
On the liaison part?
On
board
liaison or commissioner members not sitting on any boards of agencies that come in front of the city?
Well, I feel very strongly that commissioners should not be on boards because it does smack of or could potentially have an appearance of impropriety.
I agree. I would prefer that there be a policy because I think there's been inconsistency in the past. I don't think it was because of that agreement, but Mayor Coons was, I think, president of the museum board for a while. I was a voting member of Main Street, and it wasn't until around budget season that I had a conversation with the city solicitor and decided to resign because we were, voting on the budget. And I think around the same time, Commissioner Gay, I think she might have been on the homeowners board, and I think we both resigned around the same time, just so there wasn't an appearance of, so I would rather there be a policy that is just standard practice for all commissioners.
Okay, well, there's no super rush, but I would like to start working on that, and we'll bring it back in front of the commissioners at some point. All right? Sure. Anybody else? Thank you very much. With that, well, actually, part of this topic is discuss liaison position with respect to Rehoboth Beach Historical Society and an agreement allowing for a commissioner to sit on its board. That's what we just did. Forgive me. Liaison. Okay, next item. Discuss new commissioner appointment as liaison to the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society and possibly making a change to the task force appointments to the Rehoboth Beach Public Library. As you know, there is a vacancy on the liaison for the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society. I put feelers out to the commissioners, and Commissioner Bunky Markert offered to be liaison for the Historical Society. However, he suggested to lighten his load, to maybe step down from serving on the task force. Is that right?
Officially, but I could still attend the meetings if I can.
So we have to be addressing two things. If we're amenable to making an appointment for Bunky to sit on the Historical Society or be the liaison, then that would be on the November regular meeting agenda. And then secondly, if we're amenable to him stepping off the task force, then we want to consider that also, because again, those were appointed positions. And what we would want to determine, maybe with Commissioner Gossett's input, since he would be the sole task force representative, whether we need to put somebody in as a replacement for that task force. Commissioner Gossett, do you have any thoughts? Are they winding down enough where one would be sufficient?
There are only currently one meeting scheduled in January. There will be others scheduled, but as I understand it, the primary agenda items for those are using the same process that designed the needs for the downtown position for the Warrington Road facility. So again, there is certainly needed input of what's going to be built out there and what have you, but it is not as effective, not affecting the downtown as much, especially if we are in a position to make the deed restriction change. So
Bunky, I would come back to you. If you are intending to try to attend meetings, then would you not be amenable to just keeping the title task force member, or if you resign from that, be willing to fill in if Patrick can't make it there?
Yeah, I just don't know what I don't know what the liaison is going to take for the Historical Society, so I kind of like to know, I would want to be designate, have that designation, but I don't, if we have scheduling issues and stuff like that, I just don't know how it's going to work yet, The good news is with the task force, it's been pretty predictable. They'd let you know well in advance when they're going to have a meeting and stuff like that, so you can.
So Commissioner Gossett, do you have any suggestions? If he'd like to step down, should we just leave it vacant, or?
I think that would be fine, because again, the input really for the next task force meetings are all focused on Warrington Road, not the downtown facility.
Okay.
So again, I think
I mean,
depending on
if you just want to leave it the way it is for now, and, you know, I mean, like I say, there hasn't been much activity since July, and then they had one meeting, you know, since then.
Okay, so the action item on this at the November regular meeting would be to consider appointment of Commissioner Bunky Margaret as liaison to the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society, and unappointing him as task force member to the library.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yes.
Thank you very much. With that, we're going to move on to the next item of new business is discuss opportunities for change to the current advisory committee structure. This is a topic sponsored by Commissioner Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for putting up the form that I decided to use to just quickly go through the purpose, background, options, et cetera, that you'll see on the form. The reason I brought this forward is for a couple of months and a couple of meetings, I've made some comments about maybe it's time to take a look at how our committees are structured and why we have the structure that we currently have. So I want to preface this by saying I have no skin in the game on this whatsoever. I will have a proposal that's very brief, and I'm really looking for feedback from this group of whether or not this is an issue that we think could work more efficiently as we move forward. So what I want to do today is just discuss a little bit about an idea, and it could lead to a revamping of our committees and to get feedback, as I said. So currently we have, if I'm not incorrect, and the subsequent support document is something Commissioner Gossett, I think, passed out at our last meeting. We all have a hard copy of the number of boards, commissions, committees, mayor-appointed, task force, sunsetted, et cetera. And what's in the middle of this document are the 6 committees that are mayor-appointed. And they are animal issues, boardwalk and beach, budget and finance, environment committee, streets and transportation, and trees and green infrastructure. And I even had a question about the Budget and Finance Committee.
Can I make let me
Yes.
make some corrections real quick?
Please.
I meant to, but I didn't get to it. The Budget and Finance is a committee was a committee only of the commissioners, and we sunset that some time ago.
Okay.
So we crossed that off. So we really just have 5 committees. But also, under task force, parking task force, has also been sunset.
Right.
We sunset that and thought that if anything came up, it could be given to the street and transportation, I think, or create a ad hoc committee. And then it says sunsetted. The parking garage task force is actually still alive in limbo in there. It's barely breathing. It's almost static. And I'm working on getting that settled so that we can bring it back in front of us and actually formally sunset it, because they haven't met in a while. And so with those changes, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, so that brings me to, when you go back into the other form, that we really only have 5 mayor-appointed committees. So I got to thinking about something I heard once about always thinking about the return on the time spent. What's the return on the time spent? And I filled in on committees. And for me, it has worn thin in the city of Rehoboth. The balance between time spent and accomplishments may be a bit out of whack. So as I was thinking about that, I thought, well, why would that be? And a lot of it goes to city staff responsibilities, which include attending the meetings, assisting with the agendas with the chairs, posting meeting notices, agendas, minutes, etc., and also updating agendas if additions have to be made to them or whatever the situation might be. You may not touch this only one time. As a staff person, you might touch it multiple times. And oftentimes, as we all know, we can have someone from a committee that brings us some expertise and comes to a meeting. For example, Liz Lingo is on green infrastructure, I believe, and she also, on occasion, may come and support one of our meetings. So I got to thinking about the staff responsibilities, and then on background, two very important things, in my opinion, have happened very recently. And Mayor, if you can somebody move that down to background? The last two items, which are the new digital platform of Reach Out Rehoboth, has already been introduced. That, to me, is a game changer over time as we build the audience to get real, concrete information from a very broad citizen base. And then the other thing that we as commissioners changed very recently was an agreement that we wanted to have more say in the selection of committee topics. And I just want to stop here for a minute and ask all of you, did I summarize that correctly? That that's where we really are from a factual standpoint before I go into any other element of this?
Yes.
Yes? No? Yes? Yes? Okay.
I would add one thing.
Yes.
And in terms of your description of thinness with regard to the benefit or whatever that we're getting out of the committee, I think there's a certain aspect of participation by the committee members and attendance and things like that that can affect the benefit of the committee. So, that's something else I think needs to be addressed, I guess, just knowing that can be a consideration.
And I think that's a good jumping off point to, well, what else could we consider other than replicating all of the staff responsibilities across 5 different committees? Is there an opportunity, thinking about what we have agreed to as commissioners, that we want more downward influence on what the committees are trying to accomplish and what we want them to accomplish, as well as pulling in parts of what we learned from Reach Out Rehoboth? So, is this an opportunity to launch something along the lines or create something different? And the idea that I wanted to present today is there a place for a citizens advisory group where one committee would become a generalist for what we want done instead of 5 committees, which I believe operate in silos? They have separate and distinct things that they have passion about, but it's not necessarily, in my opinion, and your opinions are much more important, they don't operate, or it's not been my experience, that they operate with a generalist view of the entire community and impact on the entire community. So, if we had one citizens advisory committee and it was populated by individuals who wanted to serve by neighborhood, that every neighborhood is represented. And Patrick, are there 7?
5, basically.
5 neighborhoods. And then you could have some additional representation as well. But no neighborhood would be left out, because I think as a commissioner, I have said many times, I live in Schoolview, and that's not how things operate in Schoolview. So on many different topics, not just committee topics, many different topics. So what I wanted to just wonder, is there an opportunity for us to say one of three things? We like the way our committees operate currently, and we prefer the status quo, or we have some interest or energy in around the idea of revamping what we currently have, and we decide to move forward. So I'm going to stop with that because it's a very simple idea. I've seen it work in other situations. I have participated in advisory groups where the shift of the individual serving moves from silo thinking into generalist thinking. So I'm going to stop there and see if anybody has any reaction, comments, suggestions, criticisms. As I say, I don't have a dog in this fight, really. It just occurs to me that maybe there is a more efficient, for everyone involved, way to do this and to really push on the vision that the commissioners want to execute. Anybody?
Well,
Anybody?
you know, for me, I think we made a big change in that recently mandating that the committees have to bring their topics in front of us for awareness, and also our authorization to pursue. I think that is a big thing. That's going to gauge how many meetings they need to have, the frequency of the meetings, what staff has to come, and I think that's all a positive. I like the silos. I like the specificity of the mission statement of the Beach and Boardwalk Committee, that those originally 10 people and now 9 people, I think, their focus is the beach and boardwalk, and I like that. So I guess I like the silos. The numbers, we would probably just, by doing one committee with how many, 8 on there or fewer, we'd be displacing 20-some people off the committee. So I don't know. I really want to gauge the public or our constituents' response to this also. So I'm a little hesitant right now.
And that's good. That's good, because every question that comes up is helpful in the thinking. This is a return on investment thing for me, that once we made the decision that you just noted, Mayor, about the influence that we want to have on the committees, well, now you've got to, we get to do it 5 times. So is that the best way? Is it the most efficient way? And I think it's been mentioned publicly at least a couple of times that sometimes we have committees that are in conflict with what they think about an issue. So, Tim, anybody
I was going to thank you. I was I believe, the lone vote against Mother May I with the committees. I think it's going to just create more paperwork for us to do. So I disagree about the silos, because as the chair of the Animal Issues Committee, we were bumped from November, but we'll go into December. And a perfect example of what Commissioner Sharp is talking about, we're going to hit head on, which had we had a larger holistic approach might not get there. But we've got Reach Out Rehoboth with results very different than the results of what the Beach and Boardwalk Committee feels, which are very different than the results that the Animal Issues Committee has recommended. So I know that's also happened with the Environment Committee, with Beach and Boardwalk. There's some issues in conflict. And so I'm not sure it's worth the time of all these committees meeting and issues getting up to us that may not have been looked at as a holistic approach, because they are siloed. Because the discussion about dogs on the boardwalk, as you know, Mayor, is probably going to be quite a discussion. but how are we going to manage all the conflicts from the different parties? And I think the advisory committee may have been able to flesh that out before we come here to discuss it.
Anybody?
Do you want to, I had something to say, but I can.
Go right ahead.
Well, I was just going to put my 2 cents in with regard to trees and green infrastructure, which I had been on as a member prior to being the chair, and actually Commissioner Sharp was once the chair of that committee, and even survived a name change, you know. But anyway, because it was called something else, and I can't remember what it was.
Mayor's Advisory Committee.
Yeah, right. Anyway, but I would say in terms of, you know, I think the good news about that committee is that they kind of had their tasks sort of assigned, so to speak, and I think have carried that on. So it isn't like we have certain events and so forth that we do, and have pretty much been able to carry that out. Although I've been a little bit frustrated with the attendance issue and so forth and so on. But I will mention that we're planning something, kind of a cleanup project that we're going to involve the environmental committee. So we decide to have kind of a dual purpose, dual group involvement, and also incorporating some other folks in town on that. But I agree that we need to touch base. I haven't really submitted a report in a while about what we've been up to and what we're planning and so forth. We were going to have a talk, an outside talk that we had this month, and we had to basically cancel it because the person we had lined up turned out to have a scheduling problem. But we're scheduling that in March as opposed to in the fall. So we'll have it sooner than, you know, not having it in the fall. But it won't be. We won't have to wait till next fall for that. But anyway, I really don't, at least in our case, I don't see the value that we would get for some other overarching citizen group. I do believe, from what you mentioned, that I think there's probably things that we could use the Reach Out Rehoboth for. I know we submit quite a number of articles to Lines in the Sand, and they get put out there, and we get response from that. And then we also are involved with the tree contribution thing, and we've done quite well with that already this year.
The tree contribution thing is
Yeah.
called the commemorative tree.
Commemorative tree. But I don't speak well extemporaneously. I have to think about what I'm talking about, and it wasn't coming to me. I'm sorry. So anyway, but that's my 2 cents.
Don?
Jump ahead. Somebody
Anybody?
jump in.
I like the idea, as you've said it. It feels to me like a couple of just quick thoughts. It would be a powerful group, and if done right, and I think what you described is, you know, a person from the neighborhoods representing their neighborhoods effectively. That to me seems right, and something we might not enjoy today, other than by our own involvement in our neighborhoods. So that's a benefit to it. The other thing that strikes me about this is it could turn out to be a nice feeder group to this board, where leaders emerge from the community in that overarching group. Not overarching group, because I actually don't think you mean it to be an overarching group.
No.
Bunky, you mentioned you didn't see a benefit of an overarching group. I don't think Commissioner Sharp means that it would be overarching. I think she means it would replace it, that those siloed groups would just go away. The other, and to that point, Commissioner Sharp, the thing that strikes me about this the most is that when you have a powerful group like this, that convene, then what, in my experience, emerges are the best ideas. Because they aren't coming from sideline groups. There's forced sort of negotiation or forced prioritization by those citizens or by those people. So initial thinking, I like it.
Can we go to the public? Oh, go ahead.
I just have one follow-up here. Again, the concept I think is interesting to approach, but I kind of look back at the initial establishment of the committees, and I think the majority of them have been in place for probably 10 years or more, or in one fashion or another or something, they've evolved a little bit. But I think trying to take a look at this is that a lot of those missions, if you will, or actions of the committees, when they were first established, took place because there was nobody else to do it. And I think over the last few years, the last 5 or 6 years, we've really increased our professional staff here at Rehoboth, City of Rehoboth. We have an assistant manager, we have a formal director of public works, we have now a new director of planning and development, we have an arborist, we have a communications manager. All of those individuals now have a role in a professional role in the city and managing those tasks. I remember, Stan, you were very prominent 15 years ago of doing the parking map because you felt it was something that was needed. And it's very true, it was needed, but now that's through our communications department. So I think those additional resources that we have, we now have the staffing and the professional abilities to kind of manage many of those things, the streets and transportation issues that come forward to the Director of Public Works, because most of those committees really call upon those staff members to say, this is our thought, could we do this? And then the Director of Public Works or the arborist or the communications manager, or whomever, really takes over those abilities and say, yeah, we can do this, or we can't do this, or that's a nice idea, but this is how it should be done, or something of this nature. And being a former chair of the Bandstand Convention Hall and Special Events Committee, we met, but it was, I found it to be very frustrating in the sense that we had professionals that were city staff that managed the bandstand, that managed the convention hall, and through the development of the communications manager with their role with the police department, now handle the special events. So again, filling those voids that 5, 10, 15 years ago, the city did not have the depth of the professional status or the professional abilities on our staff to manage these. I think it's time to really take a hard look at the committees and where they came from, and are we evolving? And the best goes back, I think, Commissioner Sharp, the return on time or return on investment, or are we managing that the best way? So again, I think that to take a look at that from my standpoint of my experience with the Bandstand Convention Hall and Special Events Committee is to take a really hard look at sitting down, talking with those 3 professionals of those 3 different areas. They're doing the job. Sometimes we're just making their jobs harder because we were trying to come up with ideas just to be useful, and to back out of that position, I certainly don't feel as if we've had any negative aspects of the bandstand, the convention hall, or special events because of the dissolution or sunsetting of this committee. So that's kind of where I'm looking at where we were, where we currently are, and perhaps where we need to be, and the better use of time and resources of our citizens. Everybody gets busier, can't make attendance. You were mentioning attendance issues, and so that's kind of where I'm coming from. But I also think an important factor would be if we were to take a look at the accomplishments of those committees over the last 12 months or 18 months they're established, they're existing. So what have they accomplished? I mean,
well, and I'm glad you brought that up because you've mentioned it in several meetings. It's not fallen on deaf ears as far as I'm concerned, but that was also part of the impetus to think about You know, how do we move forward here? Edward?
So I have some mixed feelings, I
Okay.
guess, initially. I think there are, you know, for example, Streets and Transportation Committee meeting. I think they are oftentimes tasked with something very specific, and we have a lot of expertise on that committee. Oftentimes, the chief of police or city manager or public works director will put a specific issue to that group to discuss and provide feedback. So I think having a more generalist group for those types of issues, you know, it just wouldn't work out. But I do think that it's an interesting idea, and the fact that you mentioned about different representation from the city, I think is also an interesting thought and important, because I was looking at all of us sitting up here, and we actually don't have a good representation of all of the neighborhoods. You know, 3 of you live in Schoolview, 2 of us are in North Rehoboth, and 2 in, so we don't have anyone in South Rehoboth or Country Club Estates. So it's interesting that we've got huge gaps of our town that aren't represented up here. I do think for some of the other groups, the environment, animal issues, green, you know, trees and green infrastructure, a more generalist approach could potentially work. But for me, I think since we've talked about this the last couple meetings, and I think we're all in agreement that the direction needs to come from us to the committees on what they discuss, I'm going to be much more intentional about what's discussed in my committees, because I voiced my frustration many times. I don't want to waste my time as much as I don't want to waste the city staff's time or any of our volunteers. So I'm at least feeling better with the discussion that we've had up here recently in being more intentional about what my committees at least discuss. So those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you.
Would you remind, anybody, Carolyn?
Carolyn Diefendorfer, city resident. I think if you go from 5 committees to 1, you're going to frustrate the people that are currently willing to give their time and help make Rehoboth a better place. You're not going to take, if you have, say on average, you have 6, 7, I don't know how many, what the average number of committee members is, but you're not going to take that same number from 5 and have that many on 1. You're going to tell people who are willing to give their time and help make this place better that we don't need you anymore. I also think by going from specific committees to a general committee, you're going to get some people that have very valuable knowledge on a given topic that aren't going to want to spend the time coming to meetings that don't have anything specific to their level of knowledge. Streets and Transportation, you have a person who works in, I think, urban planning, who was asked to join the committee because of his expertise with traffic. If you make it a general meeting, a general committee, he's not going to want to spend his time on everything else because he still has a full-time job. So I think you're gonna frustrate people that want to help and want to give their time to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Anybody else? Nope. Very good.
I just wanted to add, I mean, through your explanation, I was thinking in terms of, or rather, I think when Commissioner Gossett was speaking about that we now have city staff to accomplish some of the things that had been done by the committees in the past. But I was thinking, for example, with trees and green infrastructure, if we, right now we have a committee structure, we have a chair, we have an agenda, we write minutes, all that kind of stuff. And we have the city arborists come to our meetings, whereas if we were in the role to basically be assisting the city arborist, now, it would be kind of a role reversal, I guess, to a certain extent, but could we function that way? Or, if the mayor and commissioners directed the city manager that we want you to do X, Y, Z, we want you to take care of the commemorative trees, we want you to do Arbor Day, we want you to have a speaker here, we want you to keep track of this, we want you to do mapping, it's all these different things that we're tasked to do or have been tasked to do, and throw that when the arborist, I think the arborist would immediately quit, or try to find some way out, get out from under it. But because I know that the difficulty with, I think we have a lot of active volunteers here that do want to contribute and do want to be involved, but you still have to manage that. And a lot of people are not really well equipped to do that or have the time or feel like they have the time. So I think it would be, if there was some means of making that simpler, and maybe, I don't know what happens if you were to do that, where if we're just like worker bees and helpers for the city arborist, how would that work? Would we still have the same constraints of having to deal with meetings and all that kind of stuff if we're there just to help out on certain tasks and stuff that are on her calendar to do? I don't know. But I mean, that's the way I would kind of see, at least in the case of green infrastructure, how you could kind of reorient it a little bit. So,
well, let me just make a couple of comments and then a path forward.
Okay.
The intention would not at all be to frustrate anybody who wants to support the city in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
Right.
That's not the intention. I would not have an intention in this discussion of eliminating folks who have a certain very, very valued expertise that might make them a bit more valuable to a generalist group than maybe another participant. And the last thing that I would say for today is all I'm trying to do is gauge whether or not this commission has a majority of commissioners who want to think about change, who want to think about how it could be done, and want to think about whether or not the benefits would outweigh the return on the time spent today in the current committee structure. So, Mayor, if you'll go down a couple more, I think all that's left on here are our options, which are the status quo, additional discussion or an alternative proposal, or we just decide to move forward. It's for the commissioners to do that. I did not go to the extent of trying to figure out exactly what the time situation would be for staff, because I'm not 100% sure, other than how I watch Ann work, if there are other individuals that, there's certainly IT that always is involved. So I didn't put anything together, because why would I if there's not a majority that would like to advance even minimally an additional discussion. So that's all I've got for the purposes of today. Mayor?
Well, rather than resolving this today, I don't think that was your intention.
No.
How about if we put it on our December workshop?
Well, I only want to do that. I really don't like holding over.
But this gives the media opportunity to report it, and our constituents opportunity to
Well, they don't need to
respond
report
it.
stuff that's just in the infancy of discussion.
Well, they will.
My opinion, my opinion. And you can quote me that we are in such an infancy of discussion. What I do not want to spark, and I don't think the Cape Gazette wants it either, is to spark all kinds of negative rumors all over town, which oftentimes happens in a small town. I don't know if anybody else has noticed it, but I've noticed it, you know? So when I come to the commissioners and just want to determine if you've got mixed feelings about something, are you leaning a little more to the inquisitive side, or are you just uneasy with the potential? Because we haven't even taken a next step to work out how it could work. Just because I've got an idea doesn't mean squat, and I'm the first person to admit that. So, Mayor, I don't know if there's enough energy to have it on the December agenda if folks really feel it's a non-starter. I don't like to waste time.
Well, what I'd like to see at the December workshop is each of the 5 giving their accomplishments for the year, because I think that will lead the discussion.
Oh.
Okay.
Commissioner Bennett, I totally agree. I think it's at the center of really this whole discussion. I agree.
So what has transpired the last 11 months, and then we have a discussion, is the structure working?
Yeah, I'll reach out to everybody. We can make that
Okay.
happen.
I think that sounds good.
Chairs are all sitting right here, aren't they?
Well, I'm still going to reach out to them.
The only thing I heard out of all of this is Commissioner Sharp hates our citizen volunteers.
Excuse me, is something wrong with his hearing up here? So thank you all for very candid feedback. I really enjoy lively input.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. We're going to move on to the next item of business, which is the last item of new business. Discuss a policy for city's acceptance of donations. And Patrick, I think you're talking about monetary donations as well as physical gifts, I think.
Right. At this time, we really have no written policy or procedure, surprise, of donations to the city. And it is just over the past few months, the past couple of years, we have been gifted things for the city that, you know, there's no free lunch in the essence. And just some of the issues we're currently dealing with, the library, Garden of the Navigators, the city dock, benches, the drinking fountain at the foot of Rehoboth Beach, Rehoboth Avenue, dedicated signage, those types of things. So I just feel that that we need as a community to set some expectations, not only for the city, but for the donors as to what really is expected, responsibilities and expectations. So just trying to get, if there's a consensus that that type of written policy or direction needs to take place. And this would kind of outline timelines and rationale for the donation and its benefit to the city, all of those things along the line, and financial commitments, and then responsibilities to maintain those donations over the decades. Again, it's just sitting, at times I've felt the last few years we've been gifted things and it has ended up not quite exactly how it was initially reported, and it's ending up, you know, some financial investments to the city, which are not all that bad, I'm not saying that, but going into a budgetary cycle right now, I think it's just something that should be looked at. So I don't know if there's any, you know, appetite up here to do that or not.
I do. I think it's worth looking at a first draft of something. I think it's more expansive than maybe we think. In other words, you know, the beach patrol gets donations. We even have a category in our budget, I think, for beach patrol donations. So that needs to be included there as a monetary type gift. I wouldn't want to necessarily restrict how they use it, so I don't know what the criteria would be for that. The tree memorials, for me, has always been an interesting thing, that the city actually was seeking funding for trees decades ago, and said, if you give us some money, this is before my time, but my understanding is you give us money, we'll give you one of those tombstone-like memorial stones, right? And then I guess 15 years ago, or 15, 18 years ago, Streetscape came along and Boardwalk Reconstruction came along and started displacing some of those stones. And the people started to gripe that they were being relocated from where they were originally put in place. And then the trees started dying. And so the then city manager admitted that we had no policy on the tree memorials, and that if it died, was that a commitment by the city forever to replace it at city expense, or do you go back to the owner? So anyhow, that, I think there's value in doing this. I just think it's fairly, maybe more expansive than we're thinking.
Well, we're certainly not there are other municipalities out there that have donation policies and some criteria at least. And again, this is more of a guideline so that the city, and more importantly, the donors know the responsibilities and expectations that are out there. So.
I think it's great. I would do it. You know, we've got the Women's Christian Temperance Fountain that somebody's donated money. Personally, I think we should have paid for it ourselves and had it fixed 8 years ago. But regardless, now somebody stepped forward. Well, when they give a donation there, when they give a donation at the Main Street or the museum garden up there, the Canal Dock funding given, the Sister Cities funding given, all of those groups have gotten plaque. So is Harry Caswell going to donate money for the fountain, and we're going to give him a 1 foot by 1 foot brass plaque? I think it needs to be explained and limited, restricted on how much we give to all these groups.
Well,
anyhow,
just
I'm
expectations.
I'm in favor of you drafting something.
Okay. Anybody else up here?
I'm in
yes or-
favor of you drafting something.
It's two. Okay.
I think there's value in it. Yeah.
Okay. Good deal.
I think if we have a report, you know, from the various groups who, I'm speaking of the commemorative tree thing, you know, like kind of get an assessment of what comes in and how it's managed, I think would be helpful.
Sure, you donate money to the commemorative tree program. What do you get in return? Do you get? I think in that program you do not
it's a
get a
budget item.
specific
I mean,
tree, right?
Yeah, I mean, you get the recognition, the person gets a recognition, but the money goes towards, you know, the tree
general-
projects that get budgeted, and they get budgeted well in advance. So there's like not really a good kind of connection, you know, in terms of, you know, because that's something we typically ask, you know, we keep track of how much money is coming in, but then the projects that may take place usually during the planning seasons, you know, it's kind of far, like the money we collect this year might not get spent for another year and a half or something like that.
That's why I see the value in what Patrick's proposing, because for your group, for the commemorative tree program, there needs to be rules on what do you get in return for your funding.
Okay.
I think it's a great
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
Anybody else?
Won't see this on the agenda in the next few months, okay?
We'll give you a little time. Thank you. Anybody, members of the public want to comment on donation policy? Nope. All righty, well, we'll move on to commissioner announcements and comments. Anything? I just want to welcome Assistant City Manager, now also Interim City Manager Evan Miller, for being up here. We look forward to working with you over the next however long it takes. Review future meeting dates. I forgot to look them up. November 17th is our next regular meeting at 2 o'clock. And you and I need to sit down and go through our agenda for when we're starting budget meetings, right?
Mayor, also, I just want to confirm, I had sent out dates with regards to suggested meetings, dates for city manager interviews, and I think everybody has those and put those on the calendar.
Does anybody owe you a response?
Well, the way I left it is if you didn't respond, then you were coming. So
All right.
I haven't heard from anybody.
Okay. Oh, you've heard from me. Okay. Anything else? Any other comments? Citizen comment, anybody? If not, we'll adjourn this meeting at 12:13 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you.